Good morning, everyone. At this time, we'll go ahead and start the meeting for today with roll call. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Commissioner Brony. Vice Chair Sanchez.
Present.
Okay. Present.
Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Present.
Okay, this is, good morning, everyone. This is what's going to happen is we have Commissioner Sanchez via the telephone. Commissioner Baroni is planning to come in. In 45 minutes or so, he has another meeting at the Town of Taos, the approval or disapproval of a liquor license. So the only warm bodies as far as commission is concerned is myself and Commissioner Blankenhorn. I am going to go ahead and allow Mr. Malone to kind of present to the audience, to those here representing the proposed subdivision, as well as those from the public, as to what is going to occur today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In order to allow Commissioner Baroni the opportunity to participate in and ultimately vote in this quasi-judicial matter, he needs to be present for hearing all of the evidence. It would be appropriate if the three commissioners who are present, if it's their desire to, because they do represent a quorum, to continue this matter for 45 minutes to allow Commissioner Baroni to be here.
Okay, so is there a motion to do so?
I'll make a motion to postpone the hearing for another 45 minutes or so until Commissioner Baroni can attend so that he may participate in the vote.
So just to be, I'll go ahead and second Commissioner Blankenhorn, just to be more specific, if we can just go for 10 o'clock that way.
Okay, friendly amendment to my motion.
Very good. I'll go ahead and second. Commissioner Sanchez, any thoughts or questions from your end?
If that's the case, why don't you wait for me to go down there and be present at the meeting? Because the conference call, I can't really hear all that well.
Okay, Commissioner Sanchez, that would be much appreciated. We really do need the warm bodies here at Commission chambers as far as commissioners are concerned. It would be the best way to deal with this.
Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay.
Could we have this meeting, what time is it now? It's 9:10.
A motion on the table, Commissioner Sanchez, is to start the meeting at 10 o'clock this morning.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could we make it maybe 11? Give me time. I'm up here in Upper Red River. It's going to take me an hour or so to get to Taos. Can you wait on me till 11? Well, people there on the audience or the ones that are on the subdivision, is it all right with those folks to wait for 11?
Commissioner Sanchez, there are a lot of people in the audience from both sides of the issue. There is also going to be a New Mexico Association of Counties board meeting that is going to be scheduled or is scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon, but they will be coming in around 12:30 or so to set up for that meeting. So we need to be out of here fairly quick.
Well, I don't know if I can make it in an hour, sir. Chairman, it's raining. I mean, it's snowing really big time up here, and I had to take care of the problem I had up here in the Upper Valley.
I understand. We will wait till 10 o'clock. So far, that's what the motion is, Commissioner Sanchez, and hopefully you can make it on time.
I didn't get a chance to vote on the motion.
Right, we haven't done so yet.
Okay, look, can we go to 10:30, Chairman?
Commissioner Blankenhorn is willing to go to 10:30.
Okay, great. Okay.
If you can reset the motion, amend your motion, Commissioner Blankenhorn.
I'll amend it to 10:30.
I will go ahead and second. We will start at 10:30. Commissioner Sanchez, be safe and hold on so that we can vote on this matter.
Sounds good, Chairman.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Chairman Leroux.
Yes. Okay, so, folks, we apologize for things the way they've turned out this morning, but we'll go ahead and reconvene at 10:30. Mr. Edwards, ready?
Association
Ready?
of Counties, yeah.
Okay. Ready? County Clerk?
No.
Numa? Good morning, everyone. It's still morning. Welcome. This is the special meeting for today, which originally was scheduled for 9 a.m. Madam Clerk, if you can please do the roll call.
Present.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Present.
Commissioner
Present.
Blankenhorn.
Present.
Commissioner Duda.
Okay. We'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Edward Vail, if you can lead us with Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Vail. Everyone caught their breath? This morning was a little stressful. We'll move on to item 4, approval of the agenda.
So move as presented, Chair.
Okay. Is there any changes from staff? Anything that we need to be concerned about?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes. Yes.
Chairman Leroux.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to item 5. This is a public hearing. Discussion, consideration, decisions regarding the following. Mr. Vigil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Archuleta, Mr. Malone, staff, members of the public, and also I'd like to extend greetings to members of the Taos Pueblo Governing Council. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today, and I would just respectfully ask for your patience. There's a lot of information that we're going to be presenting to you, and there's a lot of information that the applicant will also be presenting to you. But before I move forward, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, today's hearing is a result of the continuation from March 18th, 2014. Prior to that, you, the Board of County Commissioners, on February 18th, 2014, also continued this application. At the February meeting, the rationale as to why this particular application or this subdivision application was continued was because the applicant incorrectly or failed to notify 3 adjacent property owners who were within the area of notice. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the applicant has submitted some documentation to planning staff, which will be introduced to you as an exhibit and later into the public hearing, if we proceed with the public hearing. But I wanted to indicate to you that the applicant's agent, Mr. Scott Sanger, has made representations that the 3 adjacent property owners waived the notification requirements to the preliminary plat hearing before the Planning Commission. And the representations are made in a document that was submitted by Mr. Nadelson and again, excuse me, Mr. Sanger. And again, this document will be made available to you. However, the document has not been endorsed or signed by the attorney representing the 3 adjacent property owners. We have been in communication with the attorney, and she is in the process of creating an email for us where she will state something along the lines that she is authorized to represent the 3 adjacent property owners, and that she is also going to represent it in the email that the notice, waiver, and release, based on the document that Mr. Sanger has submitted, she's going to represent, I believe, that St. Bernard Expansion Number 3s requires certified notices to Strickland, Backinger, Gillum, and Hinton of the December 11, 2013 public hearing before the Taos County Planning and Zoning Commission were sent to the wrong mailing address. The notices error, thus the notices error. In consideration of the agreements herein, Strickland, Backinger, Gillum, and Hinton hereby waive and release and forever discharge St. Bernard Expansion 3 from any and all claims of any kind in any judicial, administrative, governing authority proceeding including that of any Taos County Land Use Authority, now known or unknown or discovered in the future, which each or any of them have or may have as the effective date against St. Bernard Expansion 3, its members, managers, employees, agents, representatives, and attorneys arising from or in any manner related to the notice error, including any claim in the nature of a due process. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, once again, the agent for the St. Bernard Expansion 3 has verbally communicated with the applicant's attorney. Representations have been made that we should be receiving an email, I suspect, before the end of this hearing. In regards to the meeting of February, because I want to state for the record and clarification that the notification requirements were for the Planning Commission meeting in December, where the applicant erred, and the applicant did provide notice of the public hearing in February, to which 2 continuations have occurred. I do have certified mailing receipts to that effect to prove that proper notification was given.
Mr. Vigil, who is the attorney that we're expecting to hear from via email?
Mary Humphrey.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would respectfully ask that you take into consideration that we move forward with the public hearing with anticipation of receiving the letter or the email from Ms. Humphrey. I respectfully ask that you consider either setting a deadline at the end of today's public hearing, by the end of today's public hearing, or that you allow some flexibility to receive this document within 10 days or whatever is at your convenience or leisure in regards to after this public hearing. And if you have any questions, I would probably, in terms of legalities, I would respectfully yield to Mr. Malone.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it would be up to the commission as to the time to allow, but I would be inclined to require that email be received today, and if it's not, obviously there's been improper notice and these proceedings would be void because the Planning Commission proceeding was void, and that's of course the applicant's difficulty, but they're making their efforts to provide the notice so that it can be made a part of the record. The waiver of notice so that it can be made a part of the record.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Mr. Chairman, in an email just received dated May 1st, 2014, directed to me, Edward Vigil. Dear Edward, I am writing on behalf of my client, the Hinton Family Partnership, Richard C. Gillum and Drew A. Gillum, and Kent Strickland and Elise Backinger in regard to the Beausoleil Subdivision application. This letter is to confirm that my clients have agreed to a waiver of a notice as provided in Section 6 of the Certain Road Agreement between St. Bernard Expansion 3 LLC, a New Mexico limited liability company, the Hinton Family Partnership Limited, Richard C. Gillum and Drew A. Gillum, Kent Strickland and Elise Backinger, and Nathaniel R. Choi and Connie Wheeler Choi, and all parties, et al. My clients have authorized me to confirm that they have agreed to the road agreement and the waiver of notice. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Sincerely, Mary E. Humphrey. Mr. Chairman, permission to approach the legal.
Okay.
I heard it read, and I find that satisfactory.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, for the record.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. And again, I appreciate patience. We're going to be going to a lot of different documents during our presentation today. And Mr. Chairman, first I would like to establish the record, if I may. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, you have been provided with a copy of Exhibit A, which is the Beausoleil Subdivision application. You have also been provided with a copy of Exhibit B, which is the Beausoleil preliminary plat hearing packet that was prepared by the Taos County Planning Department staff. Inclusive in this packet that planning staff created or prepared for you, and I will just read the table of contents. Tab 1 is the decision of the Planning Commission regarding subdivision-002-2013. You have been provided under tab 2 the treasurer's receipt, application and lot fee receipt, treasurer's receipt for the floodplain and addressing fee. Under tab 3, you have been provided with a copy of staff review, which is for subdivision 002-2013. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, for the record, I would like to indicate that staff's review consists of 33 pages. Under tab 4, you have been provided with a copy of the lot layout-vicinity maps. Under tab 5, you have been provided with a copy of a letter from the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association dated January 15th, 2014. Under tab 6, you have been provided with a copy of the site inspection photos. Under tab 7, you have been provided with copies of certified mailing receipts and copies of photos of postings. And lastly, under tab 8, you have been provided with a copy of the legal advertisement dated January 23rd, 2014, and a copy of the legal advertisement dated January 30th of 2014. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will also be handing out some other exhibits to you, but I'd like to go ahead and read these exhibits into the record as well. Under Exhibit C, you will be provided with a copy of a letter dated February 7th, 2014 from Scott Sanger to members of the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association. And once I conclude reading the exhibits, I will provide you copies of these exhibits. Under Exhibit D, you will be provided with a copy of an email from Mary Humphrey to Scott Sanger, Edward Vigil, Tom Hinton, Rick Gillum, Kent Strickland, and to Mary Humphrey herself. This is an email dated February 13th of 2014. Under Exhibit E, you have been provided with a copy from the Taos Pueblo War Chief's office. This letter was received by the Taos County Planning Department on February 18th, 2014. Under Exhibit F, you will be provided with a copy of a proposed realignment of Bellevue Road. Under Exhibit G, you will be provided with a copy of an email from Alex Abeyta, the engineer of record for the project, to the War Chief's office for Taos Pueblo. Under Exhibit H, you will be provided with a copy of a letter dated February 17th, 2014 from Abeyta Engineering, once again the engineer of record, requesting continuation from the February 17th, 2014 Board of County Commission meeting to March 18th, 2014. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, under Exhibit I, you will be provided with a copy of a letter dated February 26, 2014, and this is from Scott Sanger, attorney for the project, to Daniel Suazo, War Chief, Secretary of Taos Pueblo. Under Exhibit J, you will be provided with a copy of a letter dated March 17th, 2014, and this is a letter from the agent, the engineer for the project, requesting a continuation from the March 18th meeting to April 15th, 2014, which you, the Board of County Commissioners, elected or voted to schedule to May 1st rather than April 15th, 2014. Under Exhibit K, you will also be provided with a copy of a letter from the Taos Pueblo War Chief received from the Taos County Planning Department on March 18th, 2014. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, under Exhibit L, you will be provided with a copy from the applicant's attorney, responses to Taos Pueblo's development conditions. Under Exhibit M, you will be provided with a copy of a letter dated April 28th, 2014, and this is from the applicant's attorney. This is to the Taos County Planning Department, indicating a copy of the gate sign easement road maintenance agreement and indicating a copy of the attached road agreement between St. Bernard Expansion and the adjacent property owners. Under Exhibit N, you will be provided with a copy of the Des Montes Ditch Association Water Bank Deposit Form received by the Taos County Planning Department on April 30th, 2014. This form indicates that the water 20 acres under OSC file 044 have been banked with the Des Montes Ditch Association dated February 18th, 2013. Under Exhibit O, you will be provided with a copy of a letter from Don Suskowich dated April 29th, 2014. Mr. Suskowich, I believe, is present today. He was present earlier this morning. And if he's not present, I will read this letter into the record in a few minutes, but Mr. Suskowich will read this letter into the record. Under Exhibit P, you have also been provided with a letter submitted by Mr. Don Suskowich, received by the Taos County Planning Department on April 30th, 2014. And this letter is dated May 25th, 1995. Under Exhibit R, you have been provided with photographs also provided by Mr. Don Suskowich of blowing winds, blowing dust in the property adjacent to or in the properties of the Mariposa Ranch subdivision adjacent to this proposed subdivision. You have also been provided under these photographs, copies of photographs that demonstrate what appear to be some fertile fields back, I'm not exactly sure what the date of these photographs are. And then under Exhibit S, you will be provided with a copy of Appendix A, which is the water supply appendix for Ordinance 2005-8, which is the Taos County Subdivision Regulations. And just 3 more items. Under Exhibit T, this is strictly for the record because staff did not have an opportunity to make copies of this for you. This is a document that was submitted by Don Suskowich, and this is a copy of the Mariposa Ranch subdivision, which I believe is the design guidelines under Exhibit T. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, under Exhibit U, there is a copy that will not be provided to you, but this is also a copy of the minutes from February 18th, 2014. And lastly, under Exhibit V, there is a copy of the minutes dated March 18th, 2014. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that establishes the record.
Thank you, Edward. Mr. Malone?
Mr. Chairman, Edward, were copies provided to the clerk?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, let the record reflect that staff will provide copies of all these documents to the clerk right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would respectfully ask you to turn to tab 3 of the handout that planning staff provided to you. This is planning staff's report, and Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this report may be a little antiquated or outdated. As a result of the applicant asking for 2 continuations, the applicant has met with the adjacent property owners represented by Mary Humphreys. The applicant has also had meetings with Taos Pueblo to address concerns that Taos Pueblo has had in regards to this application.
Is Taos Pueblo represented by an attorney?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I believe that correspondence between the applicant and the Pueblo has been referenced or directed through Susan Jordan, I believe, who is the attorney for Taos Pueblo, and I do not know if she's here today or not.
Okay, she's not, okay.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and once again, this staff report was prepared before these meetings evolved with these entities, and so this staff report, again, is not up to date based on the meetings that have transpired. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Abeyta Engineering Incorporated, agent representing the St. Bernard expansion, excuse me, just one second. I need to read something else to you, hold on. I need to correctly read this into the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Continuation of public hearing. On March 18, 2014, the Taos County Board of Commissioners, at the request of the applicant, in order to allow the applicant to meet with members of the Taos Pueblo governing body to address questions and concerns raised by the governing body of Taos Pueblo, voted to continue the following to May 1st, 2014 at 9 a.m. Abeyta Engineering Incorporated, agent representing St. Bernard Expansion 3 LLC, the applicant owner, is requesting approval of the preliminary plat application for the proposed Beausoleil Subdivision, which is Subdivision 002-2013, a Type IV Subdivision consisting of a 36-lot subdivision on 400 acres, more or less, with the lots ranging in size from 10.002 acres to 15 acres. The proposed project is located northwest of Taos, New Mexico, off of County Road B-143, also known as the Hondo Seco Road, approximately 1.5 miles west of the New Mexico State Road 230 and County Road B-143 intersection in the Des Montes area, Taos County, New Mexico. The proposed project is further described as lying within sections 1, 2, 11, and 12, Township of 26 North, a range of 12 East, and is further described as Tracts 2 and 3, Map 3, Survey 3, part of Tracts 1 and 3, Map 58, part of Tract 19, Map 44, and part of Tract 8, Map 59, all within Survey 4 of the 1941 Taos County Reassessment Survey, and described as lying within the Antonio Martinez and Antoine Leroux grant. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this time refer you to the bottom of page 1 of staff's review, the introduction. As outlined in my written report before you, the applicant has provided all the required materials necessary for the preliminary plat application of the proposed Beausoleil subdivision to be deemed complete, including proper notice. Several individuals have contacted the planning department requesting information on the proposed application, including the inspection of the file. No one has contacted the planning department expressing support or opposition to the proposed Beausoleil subdivision. Inquiries concentrated on concerns such as water use, swimming pools, access roads, and the maintenance of access roads and traffic impact. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, permission to approach?
Okay.
I alluded to all the exhibits that I was going to be providing to you, and I failed to provide those to you. Thank you. There are no variances associated with the proposed Beausoleil subdivision. The proposed Beausoleil subdivision is located in Des Montes, in the Des Montes area, and is considered a Type IV subdivision. Type IV subdivisions, as per Ordinance 2005-8, Taos County subdivision regulations, are subdivisions with 25 or more lots, where each lot within the proposed subdivision is 10 acres in size or larger. The public hearing today is the second of 3 required steps necessary in the process for obtaining subdivision approval through the Taos County subdivision regulations, which is Ordinance 2005-8. All 3 steps are identified below. Number 1, the first step, as per section 4.8.7 of Ordinance 2005-8, Taos County subdivision regulations, the Planning Commission shall recommend to the Board of County Commissioners approval with conditions, or disapproval of the preliminary plat at the public hearing. The written recommendations of the Planning Commission shall be filed in the County Clerk's office within 30 days of the hearing, and a copy of the decision shall be mailed to the subdivider upon its filing. Recommendations for preliminary plat approval shall not be given by the Planning Commission unless the Planning Commission determines that the subdivider can fulfill proposals contained in the disclosure statement, and that the subdivider's proposal conforms with the New Mexico Subdivision Act and with these regulations. As per section 11.3 of Ordinance 2005-8, the Taos County subdivision regulations, an appeal from a decision of the Planning Commission shall be taken to the Board of County Commissioners. A recommendation by the Planning Commission to the Board of County Commissioners, such as recommendation on the preliminary plat, shall not be subject of an appeal. On December 11th, 2013, the Taos County Planning Commission held a public hearing for the purpose of either recommending approval with conditions, or disapproval of the preliminary plat to the Taos County Board of Commissioners. The Taos County Planning Commission adopted the review comments of planning staff as the findings of fact regarding the standards required for the application and the applicant's fulfillment of said standards. Based on the testimony of the agent, the applicant's attorney, the record of the planning department and its recommendations, and the findings of fact, the Taos County Planning Commission found that the subdivider can fulfill proposals contained in the disclosure statement and that the subdivider's proposal conforms with the New Mexico Subdivision Act and with Ordinance 2005-8, the Taos County Subdivision Regulations. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, just so you're aware, I'm not going to read the entire report into the record, okay? Subdivision regulations, and therefore voted to recommend approval of the preliminary plat application of the proposed Beausoleil subdivision subject to 41 conditions. Number 2, the second step, as per section 4.8.8 of Ordinance 2005-8, Taos County Subdivision Regulations, within 30 days after the filing of the recommendations of the Planning Commission on a preliminary plat, the Board of County Commissioners shall approve with conditions, or disapprove the preliminary plat at a public hearing of the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners shall file its written decision in the County Clerk's office within 30 days of the hearing, and a copy of the decision shall be mailed to the subdivider upon its filing. Appeal from the decision of the Board of County Commissioners shall be made pursuant to Article 11. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, based on the second step, if you'll recall back at the meeting in March 18th, when the applicant requested a continuation to the April 15th meeting, not only was it to meet with representatives of Taos Pueblo, the applicant also waived his the requirement or to section 4.8 for you, the Board of County Commissioners, to act within 30 days.
Right.
The decision of the Planning Commission regarding the Beausoleil's preliminary plat public hearing on December 11th, which is attached, 2013. The decision of the Planning Commission was filed for record in the office of the Taos County Clerk on January 23rd, 2014, 27 days prior back in February to the public hearing, thus complying with the 30-day requirement found in section 4.8 of the subdivision regulations. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, under number 3, the third step, as per section 5.1 of Ordinance 2005-8, is the Taos County Subdivision Regulations. Once the preliminary plat has been approved by the Board of County Commissioners at a public hearing and the appeal deadline set forth in Article 11 has passed, the subdivider shall be entitled to submit a final plat to the Planning Department. Final plat submittal is initiated by completing an application on a prescribed form available from the Planning Department, which shall review all materials in order to determine whether the final plat is complete, in accordance with Section 5.2 of Ordinance 2005-8, Taos County Subdivision Regulations. If there are no deficiencies, the final plat will be deemed complete for review by written notice via certified mail return receipt requested to the subdivider within 30 days after the date of application. If the final plat is incomplete or does not comply with the data requirements provided herein, the subdivider shall be notified and will be given a maximum time period of 30 days to correct the deficiencies and return the final plat for consideration. Planning staff has determined that the subdivider can fulfill proposals contained in the disclosure statement and that the subdivider's proposal conforms with the New Mexico Subdivision Act and with Ordinance 2005-8 Taos County Subdivision Regulations. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, planning staff recommends to the Board of County Commissioners approval of the preliminary plat application for the proposed Beausoleil subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 41 identified within planning staff's report or recommendations, and that the Board of County Commissioners determine and also find that the subdivider can fulfill proposals contained in the disclosure statement and that the subdivider's proposal conforms with the New Mexico Subdivision Act and with Ordinance 2005-8, the Taos County Subdivision Regulations. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I know that you have a lot of questions. I know that the public has a lot of questions, but I would respectfully ask, unless it's a critical question that you need clarification from staff right now, that you withhold your questions until the applicant has been accorded the opportunity to do the presentation. A lot of questions, I believe, will probably be answered at that point. However, Mr. Chair, before I yield the podium to the applicant, I would respectfully ask you to turn to planning staff's report of page 9. There's one additional section that I would like to read into the record. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and once again, planning staff's report consists of 33 pages. Planning staff has prepared a detailed report or review on the proposed Beausoleil subdivision. This subdivision has been in the process for nearly 3 years, if not longer, to get us to this point. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, to the italicized print, during initial discussions, and once again, some of this information that I'm going to read to you is probably no longer correct because a lot of arrangements or concessions have been made as a result of the applicant meeting with adjacent property owners, the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association, and Taos Pueblo, but I need to read this into the record. During initial discussions with the agent and the agent's attorney, reference was made to the ability of the first 12 lot owners who desire a swimming pool may construct a swimming pool in compliance with applicable codes and regulations. In fact, planning staff deemed the preliminary plat application complete and ready for agency review with the understanding that the first 12 lot owners who desire a swimming pool may construct a swimming pool. During agency review, the agent and the agent's attorney revised their application to indicate that if desired, each of the 36 lots within the proposed Beausoleil subdivision may have a swimming pool at the expense of the lot purchaser. Ordinance 2005-8, which is the Taos County Subdivision Regulations, and the Taos County Land Use Regulations, which is Ordinance 2005-10, are silent on the installation of swimming pools. The only reference to swimming pools is found within Article 16, applicable codes and appendices of Ordinance 2005-8, the Taos County Subdivision Regulations, where reference is made to the Uniform Swimming Pool Code. In conversation with the Taos County Chief Building Official, the Chief Building Official advised that swimming pool construction shall comply with current ICC codes. Planning staff, pre-planning commission public hearing had not received a single inquiry or concern from anyone related to water use within the proposed Beausoleil subdivision. As a matter of fact, the first raised concern was made during the Planning Commission public hearing, where the president of the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association advised that in recent years, a couple of wells had gone dry in the Des Montes area. In addition, the president of the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association also expressed concern with the possibility of each of the 36 lots having an individual pool. Post-Planning Commission public hearing, planning staff has received several phone calls from individuals who have expressed concern with the potential of 36 swimming pools within the Beausoleil subdivision. As the planner for Taos County, I am not happy about the possibility of 36 swimming pools within the Beausoleil subdivision. However, there is no language in the Taos County Subdivision Regulations or the Taos County Land Use Regulations that prohibits swimming pools. Therefore, I cannot prohibit the applicant from making application for the subdivision with 36 pools. Obviously, Taos County, and for the most part, the entire Southwest has been experiencing drought conditions for several years, and while the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer issued a positive opinion on October 17, 2013, the OSE also recommended that swimming pools not be allowed. A common sense approach of the proposed Beausoleil subdivision would tell the applicant that 36 swimming pools are a bad idea. Taos County, as previously stated, is in the midst of a drought. Sure, the winter of 2013-2014 began with early snowfall and the appearance of a promising moisture-filled winter. However, it has been over 30 days, and this was back when we initially prepared this report, since Taos County has received any significant snowfall and spring is fast approaching. With the exception of the possibility of 36 swimming pools, I believe that the Beausoleil subdivision is and should be considered a controlled development. Relatively large lots, 10 acres in size or larger, are being created without the possibility of further division of the 36 lots. The amount of water use is restricted to 0.5 acre feet of water per year per lot, more stringent than the Office of State Engineers' 1.0 acre feet of water per year, with each well being metered. The size of the lots, all being 10 acres in size or larger, exceeds the minimum acreage requirements of the New Mexico Environment Department for a conventional septic system with a leach line. The roadway system within the subdivision conforms with the Taos County Subdivision Regulations and will be constructed to Taos County Type C specifications, which is a 50-foot easement, 22-foot wide driving surface, 12 inches of compacted subgrade dash pit run topped with 6 inches of base course. It is staff's understanding that the agent and the applicant's attorney have met a couple of times with the president of the Des Montes Neighborhood Association and several neighborhood association members. Planning staff is not aware of the outcome, if any, of the reference meetings that will yield to the agent and attorney during the presentation. And again, this report was based back then, and I believe, I'll spill the beans a little bit, I believe that the applicant and the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association have met, and the consensus is no swimming pools for this subdivision, but we'll allow the applicant to address that. In a letter dated January 15th, 2014, which is attached, the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association identified 8 items for basis to object to the Beausoleil Subdivision. Planning staff still believes that the subdivider can fulfill the proposals contained in the disclosure statement, and that the subdivider's proposal conforms to the New Mexico Subdivision Act and with the Taos County Subdivision regulations. However, planning staff respectfully recommends to the Board of County Commissioners approval of the preliminary plat of the Beausoleil Subdivision with the understanding that construction of swimming pools will be limited to 1 pool to be shared by the Beausoleil Association, or the elimination of swimming pools in their entirety. The lots choosing to have a swimming pool shall conform to the 0.5 acre-feet of water per year per restriction. Consideration shall be given to utilizing swimming pools for additional fire protection. Lots are limited to a maximum annual water use of 0.5 acre-feet per year per lot. Water use shall not exceed 0.5 acre-feet per year per lot. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that effectively concludes planning staff's report. I'm not going to cover each one of the sections. A lot of the questions that you have and the public has, I believe, will be addressed by the applicant in their presentation. Once again, planning staff recommends conditional approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the recommendations or conditions identified in planning staff's report and identified as conditions 1 through 41. And if need be, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm strictly referencing those by reference, and if need be, I will yield to you if you would like for me to read those into the record later into the public hearing. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Thank you. Mr. Abeyta.
Swear and affirm under oath and penalty of law for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual.
I do.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Alex Abeyta. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. First thing I want to do is Edward submitted for the record a group of Exhibits C through B or so. Exhibit C has attached to the Scott Sanger letter on Exhibit 1, which is an updated water budget letter. And at least in the packet I see, Edward, page 2 of the exhibit on the water budget is not there. So what I want to do is go ahead and submit for the record the full 2 pages of exhibit. Exhibit A, which is the application book, as Edward talked about, consists of quite a bit of information, so I'm basically going to walk you through it and summarize each of the sections. Within the front section, under the cover, is the actual subdivision application. St. Bernard Expansion 3 LLC is the applicant, developer. Abeyta Engineering is the agent. Scott Sanger is the attorney. Jason Hall is the geohydrologist. This is a Type IV subdivision, 36 lots on 400 acres. 34 of the lots are 10 acres or greater each. 2 lots are 15 acres each. Included within the application are the floodplain questionnaire and clearance, the preliminary addresses that are assigned to the lots, A copy of the survey and warranty deed where St. Bernard purchased the property from Nat Troy. Tab 1 of the application book is Article 4, and these are just general responses to requirements for preliminary plat approval. Under Section 4 there, all of the engineering is prepared by Abeyta Engineering, Alex R. Abeyta, P.E. All of the survey work is done by Scott Kroll, registered surveyor. We've provided all the appropriate responses for Section 4 dealing with preliminary plat. Going on to Tab 2. Tab 2 is the Appendix A, water supply. Jason Hall, after I get done with my presentation, will come up and give you a little more detail about the water study that was done and the results of it. And all that is part of Appendix A, which is within Tab 2. Tab 3, liquid and solid waste. We did ribbon tests out on the property, and the results of the ribbon test show that the percolation rate of the soil types out there are adequate for standard septic tank leach field permits. So each of the 10-acre or greater lots will pull a septic tank leach field permit at time of zoning clearance and building permit process through NMAD, and that is clearly spelled out in the disclosure statement to the lot buyers. Solid waste, they will be required to work with Taos County and either have the solid waste picked up by Waste Management or any other approved private hauler. Tab 4 is Appendix C, which are roads and utilities. All roads will be Type C, 50 feet wide easement, 30 feet wide road, 6 inches of base course, 12 inches of pit run. All the road design plans meet the requirements of the subdivision regs. Also within Tab 4 is the STH, known as Site Threshold Assessment. It's a first stage traffic analysis form required by New Mexico Department of Transportation. And even though the access to this subdivision is through a couple of county roads, DOT requested that this STH be provided. Mr. Rick Chavez, the County Public Works Director, also asked for an assessment of the impacts from this subdivision. The STH basically shows that there is no further level of traffic analysis required. Normally an STH may show that you need a traffic analysis or a traffic impact analysis, and in this case, the STH is all that was needed. Tab 5, Appendix D, are the fire protection regulations. Once again, all the roads meet all the radii and grade and width requirements for fire protection equipment. The developer will install 30,000 gallons of fire protection underground with a dry hydrant. Tab 6, Appendix E, are the regulations for terrain management. We've provided pretty well all the requirements of Appendix C. The terrain management plan was reviewed by Mr. Peter V. Hill from Taos Water Conservation District, and we'll talk a little bit about their letter in a little bit. Tab 7 is a cultural resources survey, archaeological survey performed by Lone Mountain Archaeology Services. The cultural survey found several archaeological sites. As a matter of fact, it's 14 sites that are being preserved. And by preserve, we mean that the building envelopes and or the roadways will go around and not over these cultural sites. Tab 8 is the disclosure statement. The disclosure statement is prepared by Scott Sanger, and that's basically what's provided to lot buyers at time of looking at a lot for potential purchase. The disclosure statement follows the format required by the county subdivision regulations. Immediately following the disclosure statement are the state agency letters that were provided to us as a result of public input through agency review. The first letter is a letter from the Office of the State Engineer dated October 17, 2013. And I just want to read the first paragraph into the record. A letter from John W. Longworth, P.E., Office of State Engineer, to Mr. Edward Vigil. The Water Use and Conservation / Subdivision Review Bureau of the Office of the State Engineer has reviewed the reference subdivision proposal pursuant to Taos County Subdivision Regulations and the New Mexico Subdivision Act. Accordingly, a positive opinion is issued. So basically, the state engineer has concurred and agreed that we meet all the requirements for using 7212-1 individual wells for each of the 36 lots. The state engineer, when they issue a permit, will limit one well for one lot or one home to 1 acre-foot. Your subdivision regs limit it to 0.5 acre-feet. And that's what we're going with. In a little bit, I'll talk about the water budget, and we're actually estimating a lower water use than the 0.5 acre-feet. The next agency review letter is the Taos Soil and Water Conservation District, a letter dated August 9, 2013, addressed to Mr. Vigil from Peter Vigil, the district manager. Basically, in the middle of his letter, he just talks, as written, the terrain management plan does meet and confirm to the county code requirements with respect to terrain management. The next letter is from the New Mexico Department of Transportation, dated September 12, 2013, to Mr. Edward Vigil from Jeremy Lujan, Property Asset Management Agent. The appropriate engineers of DOT have reviewed the submitted material on the above and do not have any further comments. And normally when DOT has a comment, they'll ask you to address it, and in their final letter, they'll just say no further comments. That's a favorable opinion. The next letter, dated July 31st, 2013, was a letter from Mr. Vigil to Rick Chavez, Taos County Public Works Director, providing him the responses to his letter dated January 23rd. We did not receive a response from Mr. Rick Chavez on this, but we went ahead and met the requirements. So in essence, it's a favorable opinion. Attached to that was our July 29th letter, 2013, wherein we provided the STH. We provided clarification on the DOT access permit not being required, and we provided information on stormwater runoff that might reach Highway 522. Next page is the original January 23rd, 2013 letter from Mr. Rick Chavez, where he's asking about those concerns. The next letter is Department of Cultural Affairs, Historic Preservation Division, dated August 29, 2013. In the second paragraph of the letter, Ms. Michelle Ency, archaeologist, says, HPD does not have any other concerns, and this corrected information will ensure that the archaeological sites are avoided and protected as proposed by the subdivider. That's a favorable opinion. The final letter we have is from the Taos County EMS, Emergency Medical Services. Ms. Darlene Torres issues a favorable opinion. We did not receive responses from the Volunteer Fire Department, or in this case, the Hondo Seco Fire Department. The next item within the Tab A or disclosure statement is the title commitment on the property, a sample well share agreement. These lot buyers will drill their own private water well. However, if two adjacent lots decide to share one well, there's a standard well share agreement here for their use. The next item is Exhibit 1, which is the water conservation and quantification budget, which is in your application book, or Exhibit A. Initially, that water budget included allowing only 12 of the lots to have swimming pools. As the application evolved through agency review, the water budget was revised for all 36 lots to have swimming pools. As the application went through the Planning Commission public hearing process, the current Exhibit 1, which I handed out for the record a while ago, clearly shows that none of the 36 lots will be allowed to have a swimming pool. There will also not be a community pool on the 400-acre development. The original water budget in the application book, including swimming pools, was going to be an estimated water use of 0.48 acre feet per lot. The swimming pools estimated 0.11 for each of the lots. With the new budget, we basically have reduced the proposed water use by 22.92%. For the 36 lots using 0.37 acre feet per year, which includes the primary residence and a guest house, the annual water use will be 13.32 acre feet. The Taos County Subdivision Ordinance allows 0.5 acre feet, which would be a maximum use of 18 acre feet. So we're about 5 acre feet under the maximum allowed. This water budget is very conservative. It does assume that all 36 lots would eventually build a guest home, which won't happen. It does require the home builders to not install an evaporative swamp cooler. Any homeowner that requires cooling will be required to install refrigerated air conditioning. This water budget was approved by the Office of State Engineer as part of the original submittal. Next, after the water budget, are the declaration of easements, covenants, conditions, restrictions, CC&Rs as we call them. There's some design guidelines. Tab 9 is the agreement to assure completion of infrastructure. Your standard agreement for infrastructure talks about the assurance that all the infrastructure will be constructed by security or by confirmation that there's a bond or a letter of credit. In this case, the applicant has decided to escrow the construction amount with Westar Mortgage out of Albuquerque. It would be proposed that construction draws would be done monthly. The engineer estimate for the construction cost is within tab 9 behind the agreement for infrastructure. The estimated construction cost is $1,523,060. Plugging in the 10% contingency and gross receipts tax, the full development cost is $1,796,830. We have let the project to bid already. We have selected a construction contractor. Obviously, we know that we can't clear and grub. We can't do any work till we have final plat approval within a few months, hopefully. The contractor will be ready to get going as soon as final plat approval is done. We understand that the escrow agreement needs to be worked out with county staff, Bob Malone, the county attorney. All the documents need to be in order such that the final plat can be signed and recorded. Then at that time, construction would break ground. So the standard letter of credit that is in Exhibit B of that is kind of be something different. Like say it'll be an escrow fund. There's also a termination of agreement to assure completion of infrastructure, which will happen at the end of the job. My office will be overseeing construction, doing general inspections and certifications monthly for the construction draws. Tab 10 is the list of property owners that have been sent certified letters. It includes all the agencies that were provided application books for review. It includes the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association. And of course, we had some older addresses for 3 of the lot owners, which were certified mailed more recently with the correct addresses. The back of tab 10 is the Taos County property identification maps that show the 400 acres and all properties within 1,000 feet. Tab 11 are the survey plat is on 5 separate sheets. As mentioned earlier, that was prepared by Scott Crowell, Rio Grande Survey. The survey plat shows that setbacks from property lines will be a minimum of 50 feet. Tab 12 are all the civil engineering drawings showing the design. Those are actual construction drawings which would get stamped prior to construction. As the project evolved through the application process, there were several meetings with Taos Pueblo, several meetings with the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association. I'm going to have Jason Hall come up in a little bit and talk about the water study. When he's done, Scott Sanger is going to come up and talk about the agreement with Taos Pueblo as far as the discussions about the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association. We also attempted to meet with the Upper Arroyo Hondo Mutual Domestic, Ms. Pam Harris. That meeting has not yet happened. I understand they have their next meeting possibly coming up on May 8th, and we're prepared to meet with them and attempt to educate them on what this application process is. The Taos County subdivision regs do not require community water systems for a Type IV subdivision. It's an option that's there. The nearest mutual domestic to this subdivision is quite a bit away. It would be cost prohibitive to expand infrastructure over to this development. And for that reason, the applicant has chosen to do or have lot buyers drill their own private water wells. I'm going to have Jason come up next, and then Scott, and then after they're done, we'll entertain questions. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Malone, the process in which we can entertain questions from the public, if you can describe that.
Mr. Chairman, at this level, at the county commission level, interested parties are entitled to cross-examine, and you could do it after each speaker, which I would suggest if there's going to be cross-examination, it would make sense after each speaker. Interested parties are defined as property owners within the area of notice. It doesn't mean just the general public who has an interest in this, but interested parties are parties with a pecuniary interest in the matter.
Okay, and staff has also recommended that we listen to all of the presentations from the developer before we entertain questions from other.
And Mr. Chairman, just to make an important distinction so that no members of the public are concerned about this, when I say limited to interested parties, I'm talking about cross-examination. Other members of the public are still, it's appropriate for them to make their comments and to introduce evidence of their own.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, yes, staff's recommendation to allow the applicant to continue with their presentation.
Okay, we'll do so then.
I do.
Would you please state your name?
Jason Hall. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. I'm a geohydrologist and prepared the 50-year water availability assessment for the Beausoleil proposed subdivision. We'll go over, there's a lot of technical information in here, and I'll go over just a summary of everything, and then we can go through questions when the appropriate time arises. As Mr. Abeyta already described, the lots will be limited to half an acre foot per lot for a total maximum diversion from all the subdivision wells of 18 acre-feet per year. The groundwater available beneath the proposed subdivision is more than sufficient in quantity and quality to meet the proposed subdivision demands. There was a test well drilled to 440 feet on the subdivision property that was tested for 48 hours of pumping at 10.5 gallons a minute, and then recovery of the water level was measured to full recovery directly following the pumping test. Water quality samples were collected toward the end of the pumping test to ensure collection of accurate samples from the aquifer, and those tests meet all EPA and New Mexico Water Quality Control Commission maximum contaminant levels for both primary and secondary contaminants. The pumping test data indicates that there were no hydrologic boundaries encountered during the test, and that the aquifer penetrated by the test well has no significant barriers to groundwater flow in the vicinity. The static water level of the 440-foot test well was 306 feet when drilled, and the long-term water level trends were gauged from a nearby USGS monitoring well, and they indicate a decline of approximately 0.21 feet per year, which the 440-foot Beausoleil test well can is very capable of absorbing over the next 50 years. Okay. In addition, off-site effects were modeled, and wells of other ownership within 1,000 feet of the property boundaries were analyzed, and the 50-year effects on those wells were modeled based on the maximum 18 acre-foot withdrawal once the subdivision is fully built. And the drawdowns in those wells, the predicted drawdown in the pumping well, the test well on site, over 50 years is 6.3 feet. The predicted drawdowns in the nearby wells of other ownership are from 3.5 feet to 3.1 feet of effect over the 50-year period. And beyond that, we get into more technical information. The water availability study does show that there's more than enough groundwater of very good quality available beneath the subdivision. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Commissioners.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I believe that Mr. Sanger will be speaking also on behalf of the application.
Okay.
I do. Scott Sanger.
Okay.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning. I'm pretty spoiled. I get to work with subdividers who are willing to follow the rules. And in this case, what we have is a no variance application. I've been out working with the neighborhood association. I believe we've all understand each other. We've also worked with several neighbors around the site. They were all, of course, worried about the effect on their neighboring lands. And we have a series of agreements I'd like to put into the record with the different neighboring groups. The first one is with the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision Association. They are on our boundary. I think the plat disappeared but that was a subdivision that was put together in the mid-'90s, and it was large lots, and that subdivision, I'm told all the lots have been sold, but to date, only 4 homes have been built there. Their neighborhood association, however, is active, and we worked with them on an agreement, and it's called Gate, Sign Easements, and Road Maintenance Agreement. It's already been signed by the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision Homeowners Association, and it essentially deals with what will be done with the road during the course of construction. They're worried about damage from the construction, from blowing dust from to the road that we're using for access to the subdivision. And in the agreement with the Mariposa Ranch Homeowners Association, the road, as it's used, will be regularly watered as the construction equipment comes through to try to keep the dust down. That's part of this agreement. And then also the subdivider has agreed to restore the road after the completion of construction. And as part and parcel of all of that, we also agreed that none of the staging areas for the road construction within the subdivision would be across the line on the Mariposa Ranch side. Instead, they'll all be within the subdivision property. And that's for storage, that's for equipment, that's for their staging purposes. And that agreement is signed, so if I can give it into the record.
Now, the Mariposa is located north, west, east?
It's located north. It's at the top of the map's gone again. It's between Hondo Seco Road and the subdivision is the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision, and the primary access for Beausoleil Subdivision is through the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision.
Okay.
On the other end of the property, the south end of the property, we have neighbors. Well, map doesn't go quite far enough, but there are neighbors below. They, of course, were concerned about traffic, increased burden on their properties, and as a result of that, we worked with them to make sure that their road was not being used for access to the subdivision. Instead, it's being used for emergency access only. Subdivider has agreed to the installation of a gate. Keys to the gate are going to the Hondo Seco Fire Department and to Taos County Sheriff's Department, so that emergency access can be accessible. That is part of the agreement with the neighbors. This one is called a relinquishment and vacation of easement, and this also extinguishes a road that used to go through to Taos Pueblo Tract B, which is on the left boundary as you're looking at the screen.
This isn't, these neighbors aren't any part of any particular neighborhood association?
No, they just happen to be neighbors, and they didn't want the traffic to go their way. And looking at the roads and access, the better roads came in through the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision, and that access easement was granted by the owner of, the former owner of the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision when the land was conveyed to the subdivider. And that document that memorializes that is called a relinquishment and vacation of easement, and that is actually recorded in Taos County records at book 815, starting at page 921, signed and recorded. I'd like to put that into the record as well. The next agreement is the one that we were talking about earlier, and this is with 3 particular individuals who have lots in Mariposa Ranch Subdivision that are immediately adjacent to the proposed Beausoleil Subdivision. That particular group of owners, their names are Gillum, Hinton, and Strickland Backinger. They were represented by Mary Humphrey and Mary as an attorney, and Mary did pass a letter into Edward today to allow this to go ahead. This agreement is a little bit more meaty in that what has happened is these people, the way the Mariposa Ranch Subdivision was put together, they were very tied into view corridors and blocking of views from their neighbors. And the road that was originally proposed for the subdivision is shown on the plat. The subdivider agreed to move it. We're moving it over 400 feet away from the common boundary. And in the agreement with the neighbors, that is a part of it. In the agreement, there is a relocation map, and I'll introduce this to the record, showing where the subdivision road is going to go, as opposed to where it was originally planned. In addition, they requested the construction of a berm to block view, to block headlights, and subdivider agreed to all of that. So this particular agreement is between St. Bernard Expansion 3, the subdivider, the Hintons, the Gillums, and Backinger, and Troy, who owns the underlying easement to the property. And this agreement not only relocates the road, and it indicates the gate location, but also we've concluded an engineering design for the berm to be built, and that has all been approved by the neighbors, and that letter is what came in from Mary Humphrey today. So I'd like to put that into the record as well. The other neighbor we're still working with. The other neighbor is Taos Pueblo. And Taos Pueblo has expressed many concerns. And Alex already put it into the record, but because it's important, we wanted to share copies with all of you. The discussions with Taos Pueblo are ongoing. We've agreed to meet some more. We've been working cooperatively, and they gave us a series of requests, and what I'm about to pass to you guys is the answers from the subdivider to those requests.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We got it. We'll give it to him.
Subdivider, Alex and I have already been in conference with Taos Pueblo for more than 5 hours. The discussions have been open and friendly. What you see in this chart is the subdivider has agreed to most of the requests from the Taos Pueblo. There are a couple requests that we're still dealing with, they can certainly speak for themselves. We've been in contact with their attorney as recently as yesterday evening and again this morning. I believe we're going to wind up with agreements that we can all live with. Taos Pueblo is justifiably concerned about the effects that this particular subdivision will have on their next door land. And what we have in this chart is a series of requests from them and the subdivider's responses. I will say that there are only 2 responses that the subdivider said, no, not so fast. This particular subdivider, as the staff has pointed out, as Mr. Abeyta has pointed out, has completely followed our Subdivision Act requirements. Were it not for that, we would not have been deemed complete. All the state agencies that needed to review have reviewed and approved. And at this point, what we have is 2 questions from the Pueblo that we're not comfortable with the requests. One is they asked us to go to closed septic tank systems. Our application involves New Mexico Environment Department approved septic systems, and their approval letter is within the package that has been submitted. The other request that we were given was the request to, at some time in the future, have these homeowners commit to hook up to a community-wide sewer and water system. That request was not agreed to by subdivider simply because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't know if or when a municipal system will be set up out there. We also do not know, and nobody knows, what it would cost to hook up to such a system. Meantime, under state engineer's office approval and approval of our water budget, our plan is to go ahead with single-family wells, but restricted to half-acre foot each as per Taos County ordinance. Other than that, there's a question hanging around about the water rights that we have that are pertinent to the property. And when the determination was made to go ahead and subdivide, the owner of the water rights, the subdivider, went ahead and banked them with the Des Montes Association, Ditch Association, that's been accepted and is part of the documentation that Alex already put into the record. What's important about that is, to me anyway, this water is not being used on site, but by virtue it's not being used on site, by banking it, it means all the parciantes on the ditch get to share those waters, of course, depending on water availability. In terms of what happens to those water rights today, tomorrow, or the next day, for now, the plan is to leave them banked. There's no immediate plan to do anything with it, although there have been requests from the Mariposa Ditch Association and also from Taos Pueblo about the possible availability of those water rights for purchase. And at this point, there's been no decision made other than they're banked, that's where they should be. And the banking is to prevent them from forfeiture, and they're banked under a particular state statute. Beyond that, I'm sure there's questions, and I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Anyone else that is going to present? Okay, so that's it. Mr. Malone, at this time, I can open the meeting up to the public, correct?
Mr. Chairman, just yes, with the important distinction that questions for the applicant are separate from comments and other evidence that the public may want to introduce.
Okay, and each individual that wishes to speak needs to be sworn in as well?
They do if they're speaking. If they're only cross-examining, which I would suggest next would make sense, since the applicant just presented, they don't need to be sworn in to just ask questions of the applicant.
Okay, and in terms of the commission members wishing to have, or questions that they want answered, when can we do that?
That would be appropriate at the same time.
At any time?
Yeah.
So even at this point?
Exactly.
Okay, well, I have some questions for Mr. Sanger. With regards to, there was, I believe, like the third item with regards to a Pueblo access road that you mentioned. There was also a vacation of easement, and those were under some neighborhood concerns. There was no particular neighborhood that was involved in the vacation of that easement.
Well, there was one neighbor whose land the road went through.
Okay.
And that neighbor agreed to abandon the use of that road, and that's one of the documents that was put into the record.
Okay, and you did state that that road is used by Taos Pueblo in order to access their lands?
No.
No?
No, they may have been using it, anybody may have been using it across time, but now there's an agreement in place closing that road. And it was through people named Makovziak who are on the southern boundary, and they are signers to this relinquishment and vacation of easement document that's in the record.
And the Pueblo has signed off on that road as well?
The road is there in terms of the Pueblo's usage. We are not aware of any historical usage, but at this point, the road has been closed and no longer accesses Pueblo lands. And as part of what Pueblo requested in our meetings, we reconfirmed to them that that road has been legally abandoned.
And they had no problem to it being closed? It doesn't inhibit any of their uses for Taos Pueblo?
We'll let them answer that.
Okay.
They asked that the road be abandoned, and we have done so.
Okay. And then with regards to the water rights, what is the total amount of water rights that is involved?
20 surface acre feet that were transferred to St. Bernard Expansion 3 by the Troy family when the property was purchased. That particular water right was reestablished by irrigating a portion of the subdivision property. As I said before, when it was determined to subdivide the property, that's when the rights were banked.
And these are surface water rights, which means the property was irrigated or continues to be irrigated?
Well, it was irrigated until the point that the subdivider determined to no longer irrigate and to go ahead and put this into the water bank.
Okay. And the water bank that you are talking about, you said it's the Des Montes Neighborhood Association?
No, it's the Des Montes Ditch Association.
Ditch Association, okay. And You did say that they are going to bank them with the association for the meantime.
Yep, they've already been banked, and that document has been
Are there
shared.
any specific dates as to when maybe they will go back, the developer will go back and decide?
Well, they were deposited for 2013, 2014, and 2015.
Okay. And so how do these surface water rights transfer then once buyers come into the subdivision? Will they have a say-so as to how those water rights are going to be distributed or disposed of? Or will they be in the sole ownership of the developer?
They're in the ownership of the developer. There's no commitment made nor necessity to do anything with those rights. The well permits that are being pulled are constitutional under state law. They are pursuant to statute, where everybody who wants to drill a well has the right to drill a single-family well, and that's the part of the statute that we're complying with.
Right. And what, those are consumptive water rights?
These were surface rights.
Right, but
that are banked.
as far as the potential buyers of the subdivision, they will have X amount of water that they will be able to utilize on a yearly basis, and that will be measured. Where do those water rights come from? Those are subsurface water rights?
Subsurface rights, and they're pursuant to state statute, where
Okay.
every New Mexican has the right to drill a well. And the limitation on it under current state law is 1 acre-foot from that well, and yet Taos County regs say half-acre-foot, and Subdivider has agreed to the half-acre-foot required by our ordinance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions from commission members? Mr. Blankenhorn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with Jason, I guess, if I could. Just have a few water questions.
Yes, Commissioner.
So the 6-foot drop in the water table, that occurs at the subdivision, and then as you get further, I suppose that diminishes?
Correct. That's the anticipated drawdown of the well there over 50 years.
Right. And the water table is about 150 feet deep?
We hit water, the static water level stands at 306, and so the water column in the well itself is 134.
Okay.
It's 440 feet deep.
And at what point, who do you work for, by the way? Do you work for the state engineer?
I work for myself.
Oh, okay, so you're
I'm
a private
consultant,
contractor.
yes.
At what point does the state engineer say that's too big a percentage of drawdown? Do you know?
I do. They have the way that I could read you the way that I wrote it up in the report, and that is they require you to determine a lowest practical pumping water level. And so that's based on allowable drawdown equal to 70% of the initial water column. And then you have to take into account a 20% factor for drought, well inefficiencies, et cetera. And the result is a total maximum allowable drawdown of 67 feet. Now, in reference to how...
I'm sorry, it's 67 feet if it's a 130-foot water table, or 67 feet in any column?
That's based on this well
Okay,
itself. Yeah, and that's total allowable drawdown over the 50-year period. Now, the actual modeling for how much the well would draw down, the reduction in the static water level over 50 years is based on some modeling that the state engineer provided the foundation for. It's the Tice model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where the arithmetic comes from, I guess. So the 6-foot drawdown is about 60 feet less than would be
the
considered
maximum allowable.
than the maximum allowable.
Correct.
And did the state engineer have any opinion on the swimming pool controversy?
That would, the letter that Mr. Vigil received was the only notation that I heard of from the state engineer on that, saying that they would recommend not allowing swimming pools. That's the only statement that I'm aware of from them.
Maybe I'll follow up on that one with Alex or Edward. Let's see. Well, I guess that's it. My main concerns were the basis, the arithmetic that you came to the conclusion, the arithmetic that you got in your formulas, and the maximum allowables from the state engineer. That's what I was most concerned with. So I wonder if, Alex, if you could answer that on did the state engineer have a specific concern about pools more than just that it reduced the water budget by 20%, or is there something else in there?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm looking at the technical memorandum that came with the state engineer letter dated August 23rd, 2013. I'm not seeing where, in the original report, they issued a negative report because of the swimming pools, but I don't see it here. But what matters is the current letter dated October 17th issued a favorable opinion. That was based on 12 swimming pools, and they did have a concern on that the swamp cooler or air conditioner was using up a significant amount of water. And since then, we got rid of all the air conditioners, and they approved the water use budget based on that. Subsequent to that, we've gone ahead and deleted all swimming pools.
Right. And your budget is around 0.3 acre feet?
0.37 acre feet per lot, or 13.32 for the entire full build-out.
But an individual could use up to the 0.5.
That's correct.
The budget is just a budget. It's just an estimate.
It's our best estimate, and based on whether they do a guest home in addition to the primary home, it's possible that if they're there full-time year-round, they could approach.
And the 6 feet,
0.4.
the 6-foot drop in the water table is based on 0.5, not on the budget.
Correct.
And that's also the 50-year starting point where the water table would drop 6 feet. It starts at the time when all 34 lots are built out and everybody's using their full allotment.
Yes.
From that point on, 50 more years from that point on, and then you're looking at a 6-foot drop at the subdivision.
That's correct.
What would be the drop by the time you got to my house on Blueberry Hill?
0.
But so it goes from 6 feet to 3 feet. How far distance does it, more or less?
Let Jason talk about whether he can estimate how far out it goes to 0.
Okay, but let me just hit you for 2 more while you're there. I'm sorry, real quick. One is the cultural study. There were 5 sites recommended for register in the National Register. What would happen if those recommendations were accepted? Would that then be open to the public, or what additional?
By the Subdivision Act, the developer is required to preserve the sites. So we've actually put the 2 large sites. There's a Tract A and a B. There's I think it's an 11-acre site and a 6-acre site. Those are permanent open space. And if you look up at the screen, Tract B is 6-point-something acres. Tract A is 11.7. Those are permanent open space areas with significant archaeological sites that the developer is going to preserve.
What happens if the recommendation for nomination is accepted by the National Association?
Well, the archaeologist already submitted all these sites, and Michelle and C. at SHPO has accepted these. So after the development is built, we just can't arbitrarily go in there and remove these sites and make playgrounds out of them or anything. We got to leave them as they are.
Okay. And then my final question to you is, I did have some concerns with Mr. Suskowicz's letter, and I think the crux of it is that the Mariposa subdivision was constructed years ago, it's never been developed, and now you've got so much dust from all of the construction. I mean, this is 34 very expensive lots that could well take many years to fully develop. Could be a similar situation, and so what's your response to that as an engineer?
The majority of the 400-acre site is covered in sagebrush and grass. The 20 acres of land that were irrigated off these water rights we spoke about earlier still have grass on them. The contractor will only be allowed to clear and grub the 50-foot limit of the 3 miles of roadway. So we're not going to go in there and clear the sagebrush on 400 acres of land. We're just going to clear the limits of the 50-foot easement, build the roads. There is a seeding item to reseed the back slopes of the roadway after construction is done. So we will do our best to keep dust to a minimum. And keep in mind that at Mariposa Ranch subdivision done 20 years ago, they've only built 4 homes out of 24 over 20 years. Our development, we don't know how fast homes will actually get built. We hope all the lots will sell in 5 to 10 to 12 years, but actual home construction could be several decades. But the dust is an issue that the entire valley is facing right now. I mean, it's in Llano, it's in Los Cordovas on agricultural land that no longer is irrigated. It's everywhere.
So you're doing something different than was done at the 20 years ago? Is it a different process, or?
I wasn't the engineer on that project, so I don't know if they seeded back slopes or what they did, but you know, obviously they've got some 10-acre lots that are dry and the wind picks up the dirt.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Blankenhorn, you had some questions for Mr. Hall?
Yeah, but now I forgot what it was. Oh, yeah, about how far, what's the radius from the test well where it goes from 6 to 3?
Sure.
Approximately.
So the 4 wells of other ownership were within 1,000 feet of the property boundaries, but their distance from the test well itself was also measured. The nearest well of other ownership is 344 feet from the property boundaries and 4,290 feet from the test well. And that is the well that would experience just over 3.5 feet of drawdown over 50 years at total subdivision build out, maximum diversion from the aquifer of 18 acre feet, which, as you've heard, based on the water budget, likely isn't going to happen. And in addition to that, pumping at the full maximum allowable diversion from each of these offsite wells. So that well itself was allowed 3 acre feet. And so the model takes into account all of the wells in question pumping at their maximum allowable diversion.
And the model also takes into account drought conditions, estimating an additional 10-foot drop if weather patterns stay the same. That was what I got out of it, but I could be wrong, so please correct me.
It does take into account factors for drought and well inefficiencies and so forth. It's not a straight number in this case, but it does take that. The model does take all those factors into account.
But presuming that a drought condition continued, there would be an additional drawdown from the 6 feet.
That actually takes into account a predicted drought effect and well inefficiency. So it's a very conservative estimate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Sanchez.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I've got a question for Mr. Sanger. Mr. Sanger, you're saying that you had the conditions which you gave to the Taos Pueblo, correct?
Well, they gave us the conditions on the left side of the sheet. On the right side of the sheet are the subdivider's responses.
I understand that, but what I'm getting at is you said there were still many other concerns. So 26, is there still others that need to be addressed?
There is there's one set of issues that we're working on with Taos Pueblo's attorney. This has to do with a new state statute effective in July of 2013. Our documentation was submitted to state engineer's office and approved prior to the effective date of the new legislation. It's something that we're all going to have to be dealing with in terms of future subdivisions. It just happened that this particular application was not affected by the change of state law in terms of the state engineer's office approving the application. New state law is different. The new state law has to do with the formation of municipal water and sanitation districts. And the new state law does mandate that if there's one available, the subdivider would have to hook up. But that stuff happened after our water rights were banked and our subdivision water plan was approved by Office of State Engineer.
And also, Mr. Sanger, was the Lower Des Montes Ditch Association, were they off also? Did they get any conditions that they had issues on?
Well, what we did with them, we had an overlap. They're still here, and Floyder's still here. There happen to be ditch commissioners, and they're also involved as officers of the Lower Des Montes Association. As ditch commissioners, they approve the water banking, and as part of the Lower Des Montes Association, we've worked with them about their concerns. They do have remaining concerns that one particular landowner cannot cure, and I'm sure they'll be speaking about it shortly.
And also, you say it's going to be gated?
The gate is there, yes, it's going to be gated at two different entrances. It's going to be gated at the entrance from Mariposa Ranch Subdivision into Beausoleil Subdivision, and it's also going to have this emergency access gate at the bottom, and that connects to something called Buggy Road and Mariposa Road, which connect to Valencia Road for another way out. Subdivider has agreed to use the northerly access only. Everything else will be for emergency, and the northerly access was done by grant of easement. And one of the agreements I just put into the record determined what happens with that road and what the obligations are of the subdivider for maintaining that roadway in.
And also, Mr. Sanger, you say deputies can go in, ambulance, fire department. Does Taos Pueblo, do they have any land adjacent to that where they can also be go in and out, and also the ditch association?
Nobody, they have not yet asked for keys to the gate. I don't anticipate that being a problem for emergency access. That is what that southerly access is characterized as, and one of the agreements I just put into the record clearly defines that emergency access and what's it for, and it does allow public agencies access.
And Mr. Sanger, you touched on dust control. How are you going to control that? Do you have a...
Okay, this was a request from the Mariposa Ranch Homeowners Association, and working with the contractor and engineer, we pretty much have a plan to keep on watering that stuff off-site so the dust doesn't blow, and then on-site through the course of construction. Watering is a part of what we're dealing with because we want to keep the dust down, but it's also for compaction purposes. Alex is much more well-versed on road construction than I have been learning from him. Within the construction contract with the road builder, there is an obligation that he go ahead and keep the dust down. The other part of that agreement with the road builder is matches something the Pueblo requested. They wanted to be involved at any time there was surface excavation so that they could see that we were not disturbing any sites. That's been agreed to between Subdivider and Pueblo. The two bigger sites that Alex pointed out earlier, those sites are designated within our covenants as no build. Taos Pueblo has asked for access to determine what's on those sites. They've already had site visits so far. And through the course of the road construction, they will be notified every time we're opening up the dirt so they can see if we're finding anything. If we do find anything, so you know, the State Historic Preservation Office has to be notified. And the contractors on board, the engineers on board, and with the Pueblo helping to inspect as we're going through the process, if something's going to be found, the appropriate agencies will be contacted and will deal with what is found in terms of what state law requires and State Historic Preservation Office require. If something is found, it is not to be disturbed and not to be removed. If the Pueblo desires any of those things that are found to be removed, subdivider has agreed to work with the Pueblo to make an application to State Historic Preservation Office for permission.
And also, Mr. Sanger, you pointed out that got 30,000 gallons for fire protection of water, correct?
That's the plan.
And it says here that the tanks will be, you'll be filling those fire suppression tanks from lot 19?
Lot 19 is where our test well was drilled. The test well, when it's finished and a pump is installed, will also have a dry hydrant connection for fire suppression. The water budget does include the use for the fire protection tank within that half-acre foot per year that's allowed per lot under county ordinance.
And that's per year?
Yep.
What if something were to happen where you needed to pump it, you had big fires there, you had to go back and do it 3-4 times? Would that...
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, let me clarify one item. Scott and I have been working 2 subdivisions simultaneously. The other one that will come before you here in a few months is Sierra de Taos. So it's on that one that we're going to fill the fire tanks from the well. On Beausoleil, our water budget shows that the 30,000 gallons of fire will be filled from an off-site source.
As if that's been changed, Alex. The response to the Pueblo is we're going tanks from that well.
Okay, so if that's the case, the well, that's the test well, lot 19, is permitted as a exploratory test well. At the time that lot 19 sells, that well will be turned over to the lot owner, and it'll allow 1 acre-foot of use. The county subdivision regs restricts it to 0.5 acre-feet of use, and the fact that we've deleted the swimming pools, there's 0.37 of estimated use for the primary home and guest home. That leaves 0.13 acre-feet a year for the fire protection, which is more than adequate.
Okay. And also, Mr. Abeyta, you say this is 1,000 feet to the closest neighbors, is that correct? And
I'm not sure I understood your question.
Let me rephrase that. Okay, you got the wells that are 440 feet deep.
Correct.
And you've talked to people who live within 1,000 feet of that. Will that affect people that live further than the 1,000 feet?
We've sent out certified letters to people that own land within 1,000 feet of the boundary of the 400 acres. So from the well, it could be several thousand feet to other properties or other wells.
And I guess what I'm trying to find out is, would it affect those folks if they have wells? Will it hurt them in any way as far as their water, losing some water there?
No, as Jason indicated, the nearest well, which was within 400 feet, dropped by 3-point-something feet. So a well that's out there at 2,000 or 3,000 feet away isn't even going to see basically no impact from this drawdown at full build-out and full pumping.
Okay, and then these roads, Mr. Sanger, I know that we've had some problems in my district, for example, where they're subdivisions, and now we're coming back to fix the road. That's going to be taken care of by you folks that live in that
After the subdivider builds the road, the homeowners association, which the subdivider is still a part of by virtue of still owning lots, they have the obligation still.
And the reason I bring this out is because it's happened in our district where, you know, we had a subdivider come up, contractor fix, sell the property, and now those folks can't get in and out of their land, their houses because of the road. Fire department, ambulance, we're having problems, so I just want to make sure we don't run into that.
Well, we've got the subdivision and homeowners association on the hook, and it's in the covenants that they're required. They're also required to pay money in to honor their commitments that they're being subjected to. It seems to me, that the people who own the land there want their roads to be good, so they'll spend the money on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Barone?
And Edward, I just want to make, I guess this question would probably be to you. I know that Commissioner Sanchez was asking about the roads within the subdivision. And how, is there a guarantee, because again, people keep coming to us, after 40 years the subdivision has been there, or 20 years, and they basically say, well, we don't have any road agreements. Is there something to protect us from that? And then the other question that I have is, within this subdivision, there is nothing within our land use regulations that allow further division of these lots, creating additional lots and a need for additional wells, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Commissioner Barone, representations that have been made by the applicant are correct. Initially, the developer or the applicant will be on the hook until the road is constructed, or through the process when the road is constructed. The developer is normally still on the hook until over 50% of the lots have been sold. Once 50% of the lots have been sold, they transfer over to a homeowners association, and the homeowners association is required to provide or continue the maintenance or upkeep of the roadways. Is there anything specific in the land use regulations or the subdivision regulations? The only thing that there is available specific is that the applicant has to provide a copy of a road maintenance agreement. The only thing that we would have in place to bind these individuals would be a road maintenance agreement that would be, if this application is approved or this subdivision is approved, that gets filed for record in the office of the county clerk, and that was the only binding document that I'm aware of. In terms of your second question, if you could
And I guess, is there a way we can make that stronger so that, they don't come back to us 10 years down the road, say, ask the county to take the road over, and then, further impact our budget?
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, with all due respect, I guess I would yield the question to legal and see if there's any possible way that we could have more teeth in, if you choose to approve this at a final plat hearing, or even at today's hearing, that we incorporate some additional recommendations or conditions into the decision that would have more teeth in terms of maintenance of the roadway.
If I may, you've already got teeth in the covenants and conditions that are being recorded against the property. The teeth are real. The homeowners have got to go ahead and comply with their own rules. If they do not comply with their own rules, if they do not pay their assessments, then they wind up with a lien against their property for the amount of money they didn't pay towards the assessments. The assessments are dedicated towards maintenance of the public areas and the roadways.
And then my other question, Edward, in our LUR, is there any possibility that further division of the proposed lots could be then, I want to say through a family split or any other way that they can be further divided? I just want to make sure that that's not.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Sanger will chime in here in just a minute, but in terms of regulation, let me give you what Taos County presently has. And within the LUR, the land use regulations, they are completely silent. That is a whole different document that pertains to the land use regulations. That basically is what allows you to get developed on the land. And so now we'll reference back to the subdivision regulations, which talks us about the creation of additional lots or the creation of lots within this proposed subdivision. Specifically, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, within Ordinance 2005-8, there's section 8.2, which talks about further division of previously approved subdivisions. It states, previously approved subdivisions, including those approved under summary review procedures, may not be further divided unless the final plat of the previously approved subdivision or supporting documentation that is part of the previously approved subdivision includes an express provision for further division of the lots on the final plat, and the number of further divisions shall be limited to the number expressed on the plat. The use of an exemption or exemptions to the definition of a subdivision is also prohibited within a previously approved subdivision. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Chairman, Commissioner Barone, the applicant is prohibited from further dividing the lots within this approved subdivision, either by family transfer or and also by subdivision. As we indicated to you when this application came, or when we did our initial presentation, this is a Type IV subdivision specific to lot sizes, 10 acres in size or larger. Any creation of lot that is less than 10 acres in size throws this application out of a Type IV category, thus violating the application that's been submitted or possibly approved by you today. You, the Board of County Commissioners, has amended the subdivision regulations to allow only for the alteration of lot lines under a lot line adjustment. But again, consideration needs to be given that none of the lots can be created under a lot line adjustment that would be less than 10 acres in size.
Thank you.
And so you know, that's also in the covenants. No lot can be further subdivided. Lot line adjustments are permitted, provided no lot results in smaller lots than 10 acres.
Now, with regards to the covenants, those can be changed by the homeowners association if the majority of them vote to do so?
They cannot be changed in violation of the law.
Okay, but if they all made the decision to change one or all of the covenants?
Well, some of the covenants are going to be changing possibly by the passage of time. We don't know. But none of the covenants that are required as part of the subdivision approval can be changed without coming back to County Commission for permission. The covenants as drawn are user-friendly. I have not ever seen a subdivision come back for changes to covenants, and I haven't seen it. Maybe you guys have.
Mr. Malone, any thought on this?
Well, with regard to the concern that Commissioner Barone expressed about further subdivision, that regardless of whether the covenants are there or not, that's restricted by the ordinances that Edward referred to. And, you know, I haven't read their covenants, but I suppose that if they had some covenant that said that drapes that face the street have to be brown, they could be changed to yellow, and we wouldn't be able to stop that.
Well, and the way that's handled is we have something different called design guidelines. The design guidelines are really the architectural control standards, and what's been used in this subdivision has been repeatedly used in subdivisions that Alex's office and mine have been working on, and they essentially dictate, they get down to the basics of what happens with an individual house and construction. And there's a design review committee from the homeowners association that is supposed to go ahead and no construction can start without their approval that the application before them fits our covenants and the design guidelines.
Let me ask this question. You've got 400 and some acres, 32 or 34 lots that will be cut out for a total of 34 homes.
36 lots.
36 lots, 36 homes eventually, plus guest houses. Why not go with something that's a little bit more friendly towards the earth and do cluster housing versus spreading all this housing over 400 acres? Wouldn't that be the ideal? Wouldn't that be more earth friendly, and it wouldn't have such an impact on everything else, the neighbors and everyone else around it?
The argument is the opposite of that. The argument is the more dense the property is, is populated, the greater the effects on neighbors. Here, they're all spread out over this acreage. We don't have them all on top of each other, and we don't have them all using the same systems. In terms of earth-friendly, less density works best. In terms of urban planning, you're talking about something different. You're talking about trying to cluster things. I would suggest to you that if clustering is something that the county wants to look at, changes need to be made to the county subdivision ordinance, and changes need to be made to the county land use ordinance. For my 2 cents, the smart code thing with the smart building and clustering things together works well in cities. County Taos has tried to deal with a cluster overlay zone unsuccessfully. Their ordinance needs fixed too. I was fortunate enough to go to a few smart growth planning conferences, and my conclusion was this stuff works for cities. I don't know if it can work in rural areas.
Okay, with regards to the 20 acre feet of surface water rights, do you think that is going to impact neighboring properties in the future?
Well, they are already there. They already exist. We just stopped using them and banked them. What's going to happen to those water rights is a question that hasn't been answered yet. Who wants them, and whether or not they'll be sold, nobody said they want them and want to buy them. So for now, they're just being banked, parked, if you will, until a determination has been made. I don't know who wants those water rights. My assumption is that somebody's going to speak up and say, I'd like them.
Right, and
don't know when.
Has the subdivision owner even considered maybe donating some of these water rights to the association?
Well, right now there are competing interests who may or may not want the water rights. I believe they're going to be speaking up soon, but I don't know.
Okay. Any questions from the other commissioners? If not, at this point, I'll go ahead and allow for other members of the public to speak. I'm going either for or against the subdivision. I'm going to leave Taos Pueblo towards the end. I want to be able to listen to the neighbors that surround the property, the neighbors probably that I'm assuming with less amount of land, and then I'm going to allow Taos Pueblo to come forward after that. Thank you for agreeing to that. Ma'am, go ahead and come forward.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, not just to make their comments, but if they're interested parties to ask questions of the applicant.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Malone.
Pam Harris. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, is it okay if I give you copies of my position papers?
Please. You can do so.
I won't cover everything in here because it was shortened. I was beginning to think the Texans were the only one that filibustered, but this got lengthy. And I think it's important because part of what I'm going to cover is the geological report for Hondo Valley. You know, the subdivision is not affecting just the drilling one well where they are. Is not looking at the entire aquifer. In March 2009, the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Resource, NMBGR, Aquifer Mapping Program released a final technical report. Open File Report 505 prepared by Taos County entitled Geologic Investigation of the Arroyo Hondo Area, Taos County, New Mexico. The report stated that the ground study revealed a complex three-dimensional system with multi-hydraulic units and aquifers. The report contains geologic maps and 7 cross-sections constructed both parallel and perpendicular to the original groundwater flow, generally east to west. The report indicated that shallow perched, semi-perched, and deep aquifers exist in the alluvial fan sediments. Beausoleil basalts and sediments, and with dacite and igneous volcanic rock fracture zones. The report also states that static water levels are highly variable, regionally inconsistent, and significantly lower than those measured in overlaying perched or shallow alluvial aquifers. Transitions between shallow and deep aquifers are defined by faults. The report states the Rio Hondo is part of a stream-connected aquifer system with gaining, neutral, and losing reaches controlled by the permeability of contiguous underlying geologic units. The alluvial deposits along the Rio Hondo were probably above the water table under natural conditions, but now have locally perched or semi-perched aquifers due to the development of irrigation. In the Rio Hondo drainage, ascertation of groundwater from surface water and irrigation recharged is a critical factor of controlling the extent of the shallow alluvial aquifer. Because of the interconnections between the Rio Hondo, the Rio Grande, and the shallow, deep aquifers, depletions of groundwater from these aquifers have a very real potential of contributing to surface water depletions in a matter of decades or less. Similarly, reductions of irrigation would have negative effects on groundwater levels and the shallow alluvial aquifers. There have been a number of people whose wells have gone dry, and I think Floyd Archuleta did that. I also wanted to comment that on PBS News on 3/31/2014 addressed climate change with a report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, documenting long droughts, fires, low crop yields, heat waves, coral reefs drying, water shortages, food shortages, and economic problems. Our way of life is in danger. Our way of life is not sustainable if we don't make change. In the beginning of the paper, I also talked about the Pecos and the Elephant Butte wells that were put in because we weren't allowed to have so much water out of the river. And what happened? You know, wells deplete the groundwater. The Ogallala aquifer also has major problems, and they're saying the aquifer yields 30% of the nation's irrigation water. It could last until 2110 or longer if farmers were to cut 20% of their usage or more beginning right now. But that would reduce agricultural products 15 to 20 years, so that it was like 15 or 20 years ago. Our population has really gone up since then. According to the Taos News on April 1st, stream flows forecast for the Rio Grande Basin predicts rivers and creeks in Taos County will be flowing about 1/3 of the normal this year. The forecast is published by National Weather Service and National Resource Conservation Service. It can be downloaded by finding the story on the Taos Net. You can read it here. I'm just kind of skimming through. We also have problems with recharge due to drought. Where does the recharge water come from if there is no ground cover to keep the moisture from turning into runoff? Recharge needs a slow percolation of water into the ground held by trees and ground cover. An aquifer is defined by a rock layer that is permeable to the flow of groundwater in amounts that are usable to a population. They form as water from the surface seeps down through the rock and soil in what is called the zone of aeration and is absorbed into the porous spaces between rock granules. The more permeable the soil, the more water is able to absorb and conduct downward over time. Talking about development, we already have an expanding we already have, and expanding Ski Valley with very little benefit to the town of Taos. Ski Valley's development using Forest Service and BLM land have a determination of non-significance that did not include an environmental impact statement. The EIS would have included the communities downstream and would have taken more time. Because people in many areas of the world are so dependent on groundwater, we often have significant impact on the structures of aquifers. One of the most common impacts is the overuse of groundwater. When the rate of water extraction exceeds that of replenishment, the water table in an unconfined aquifer experiences a drawdown or is lower. Another problem with removing too much water from the aquifer is that an aquifer collapses. When present, the water acts as an internal support for the soil around it. If the water is removed too quickly and nothing is put to replace it, air fills the void left in the rocks, in the rock pores. Because air is compressible, the internal structure of the aquifer can fail, causing collapse. On the surface, this results in land subsidence, cracking housing foundations, and changing in drainage problems. Aquifers and the Ogallala Aquifer by Amanda Brainy, contributed editor from, I have the location on here. Also, the California Department of Water Resources measured the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains and reported a dismal 32% of normal. We, or they, are seeing farmland fallowed and cities scramble for water supplies. Governor Jerry Brown declared a state of drought emergency in January 17, 2014. As climate changes becomes the new normal of our water woes, will only get worse, said Steve Felici, Water Program Director for the Natural Resource Council. We have employment. Yes, we need employment, but not temporary employment, endangering our most important resource. Construction is short-term employment. We also need to slow down the population growth. I mean, this is high desert. The drought significantly reduces agriculture. To grow a garden, you have to irrigate a minimum of every 7 days. There is not enough water to irrigate hay and alfalfa fields adequately, so they are drying up. Now the county's agriculture taxes are going to a regular rate. Fields will be sold for lack of money, and more development will occur. We don't need more development. We need a consistent amount of water for the people that are here already. The County of Taos held a Taos Regional Water Plan meeting on March 31st, 2014. The state water plan handed out stated New Mexico is in the third year of drought, with most of the state in exceptional drought. Status for the first half of 2013. At the same time, July 2013 saw record-setting precipitation in parts of the state, reinforcing the importance of planning for precipitation extremes and climate variability. My conclusion is, county commissioners, you're going to have to deal with the state, the local, and the national controversies over water shortage. Are we going to wait until we have a water crisis? You know, it's important not just this development, but that we really seriously take a look at what's happening. We need to have a water dialogue, and there is going to be a committee that's formed because there was a state meeting here. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Miera?
Swear and affirm under oath and penalty of law for perjury, the testimony you're about to give is true and factual. Would you state your name for the record?
Carlos Miera. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Malone, Steve. I did have some questions in regards to the water study that perhaps Mr. Hall can help clarify. When I reviewed the the water plan, and it kind of talked a little bit about how the layout is within the map. And it basically states that the aquifer is recharged by the infiltration of runoff off the Sangre Cristo Mountains back here, and Picoris Mountains down here. I'm not sure how those ones applied, through fractured rock drainages and mountain front faults. Additionally, the recharge from participation, irrigation, return flow occurs through arroyos and the fan deposit and land surfaces, and it further states that the groundwater gradient in the vicinity of the property runs to the west, southwest, and the map itself shows a downward slope from Valdeso to the north to the east, and it kind of slopes down, and therefore basically we concluded that it's telling us that water runs downhill. And so it raises then the question then that if you are drilling wells below us, up in Des Montes area, that as the water flows downhill, as the study states, then that the recharge underground would come from the by what happens to the upper area from which that discharge or replenishment is coming from. We know that 16 wells in the Des Montes area have gone dry, not 2, no, 16. Mine was one of them. I was at 180 feet, and we had to go down to 320 feet in order to get water. And we know that that is replenished by the irrigation, because when we turn the acequia on, we get more sand in our well, and so we change the filter until it settles down. So we know it's fed that way, and historically, from the residents, longtime residents that live there, we know then that development below us has impacted our water tables, because as they continue to pump the upper aquifers, you know, even though they may be pocketed or whatever, they do drain in and replenish the amount of water, especially with the deep wells that are coming in at the end. The school, the Arroyos del Norte school, is 500 feet. We've had other neighbors whose wells are at 400 feet going dry. And so it doesn't seem, you can help explain to me, so if it's downhill, and here you're going to see a drop of 6 feet up.
I apologize for interrupting, but the folks that are providing testimony need to be sworn. Edward just...
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
Okay, Edward,
They were sworn in.
Edward sent me a note saying that they hadn't. I thought that, okay, good. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so it doesn't seem, you know, that if water runs downhill and it's going to see a 6-foot drop down here, but only a 3-foot drop up here. It doesn't seem, it would seem that the more it drops down here, the more it's going to drop up here, as historically has shown that that has been the case. And if it's also fed from the streams, from the Arroz Seco, according to what he talks about here, the Arroz Seco and the Rio Hondo, and stating that be minimal impact them over time. But we do know that the Arroz Seco at times is dry, especially during the irrigation system, but it's not dry during the winter when there is water available. So we had some really some questions regarding how the conclusions that were made and how that was laid out. In regards to that, but we do know then that irregardless, you know, we did have had wells go dry, and we do see a lot of sand build up when we start looking at some of the wells, and so we just don't quite get the idea in terms that if the water's running downhill, how it doesn't impact us up here. It's more than 1,000 feet. It's up in the areas up around the crossroads there, and those homes up in that area were primarily the ones affected by the development below us. Okay. In regards, I'm also the secretary of the Des Montes Acequia Association, and we are also been concerned about any water being taken out of that area because of our continued agreements and trying to maintain the adequate water supply to the farmers in that area. So the water banking issues that we would like to continue to keep those waters, and we would protest any waters taken out of our acequia system, because we totally rely, currently there is insufficient water to irrigate the properties that we do have. and our amount of water that's allocated to us is based on the amount of acreage available to us to irrigate. So yes, banking those 20 acres is a big help to other areas because it does increase the availability of water to other folks, which are insufficient to begin with. Because we are only allowed a certain percentage of the Rio Hondo in order to move up to that area. And so we do hope that they maintain to bank and keep those waters within our Seca system.
Now, your Seca system would have the right to protest or reject the transfer of those water rights to another entity.
Yeah, it's within our bylaws, and it's allowed with us within state statute to do that. So I mean, definitely would protest any movement of those water rights out of our Seca system.
Okay.
So I don't know. Does water run downhill? See or no?
Mr. Chairman, if I could real briefly, just to clarify the record, I don't believe that Mr. Miera is actually a party within that 1,000-foot area, but I'd be happy to ask that question on your behalf and look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, water does run downhill. We all know that.
Oh, did you say it was?
But it's not quite that simplistic, and that's not what I base the groundwater gradient on. There's an extensive potentiometric surface map here that utilizes water levels from...
If you could speak closer to the...
I apologize. I utilized a potentiometric surface map for determining the groundwater gradient, which is indeed west-southwest. I had a hydraulic gradient of 0.05 feet per foot based on water levels from more than 100 wells in the vicinity. So that gradient equals out to 5 feet per 100 feet. That's how it's flowing down. It's not consistent with the ground surface. It's not necessarily tied into the ground surface. It has to do with the substructure, the lithologic layers that you would encounter in drilling and that have been mapped, as the previous woman mentioned, extensively. And I utilize those studies in this report. How the well's up gradient will be affected, actually they'll be affecting the subdivision wells much more than the subdivision wells would be affecting them. They are up gradient. They're getting the water the water comes in through the mountains and fractures at the mountain front into this sand and gravel aquifer that sits in places above basalt, in places basalt is interfingered with it. And yes, fractures also regulate how that groundwater flows. And we've gone through all the requirements imposed by the State Subdivision Act and Taos County subdivision requirements to determine the effects of water use on the subdivision.
Mr. Miera, if you can come forward, I believe Commissioner Blankenhorn had a question for you.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No, I wasn't clear that Mr. Miera's property was actually within the area of notice. And
We're up. So.
And that distinction just relates to whether you can ask questions to the parties. So,
yeah.
Right. And yeah.
Did I answer your question adequately, or?
Well,
or Mr. Blankenhorn's question?
We get the general idea. It's a technical question and stuff, and how the water actually runs within those.
If you can come closer, if you're going to continue talking to the microphone. That way we can all hear you.
Yeah, okay. But that's it.
Okay. Commissioner
Mr.
Sanchez.
Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Miera, you touched on banking. Still a little confused. I hear it all the time. To me, you know, you bank your water. How does that work? I'm not too
But the state statute allows a person that is not using their water to bank them with the Secas in order to preserve that water right, and so they do not lose it for forfeiture for non-use. The acequia then, as the owner of the bank, has the right or the ability to use those, either use those waters for other purposes, but in reality, in cases what it's most typically what happens is you are taking 20 feet of banked water that you would normally be putting on the surface out of production. That creates then availability of those waters for other person to use. Okay. So you can do quite a number of things with it. Some folks are looking at trying to either bank them or transfer them to a mutual domestic water system and move them and bank them there. You can transfer them. But you know, for us, the biggest thing we have, say the Mariposa has, say, 1,000 acres that you can irrigate. If you put 20 acres out of production, then that means someone else can use the water. Or those 20 acres could be put into a different bank or system. I think there's a big movement, and part of what we're looking at is a long-term trying to either create reservoirs to store those waters, and so we could use it for later on, which is allowed under the Abeyta settlement, or whether we do it underground or above ground, there's a way to preserve those waters to try to re-put them back into use. But in this case, the simple fact that you're not irrigating 20 more acres means there's more water available to irrigate the other several hundred acres that we have available to irrigate within that area. In a general sense.
Thank you, Mr. Mira.
I hope that
always
clarifies.
Puzzled me. I didn't understand the banking of it. But
yeah, because right now the Mariposa, I believe, has put 150 acres into the water bank. And so it allows us to, which includes these acres, but it does increase then the water availability to the rest of the landowners, which complain they don't have enough water to irrigate with. So it really does help. And it helps the owner in terms that they do not lose the water right for non-use.
Thank you, Mr. Mira.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, sir, go ahead and come forward. You'll have to be sworn in.
Have you raised your hand? Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of law for perjury that the
Yes.
Would you please state your name?
My name's Thomas Bages. I own a small company all around fence, and I want to talk about the economics of the situation. We need a boost. The town needs a boost. The county needs a boost. We put this together, and nobody in town made any money out of it. Okay? This is a win-win situation. All right? The type of people that may buy these houses or development are extreme business people. We need to bring serious business into this community. And I think that would be a very valuable thing for the area completely. That's really all I have to say. Okay, thank you.
Sir, please come forward.
Now, could I have these distributed to the commissioners? Yes, I do.
State your name for the record.
My name is Alan Kaplan. I have lived and farmed in Arroyo Hondo for some 47 years. Says we're here to consider permitting 2 development projects with 60 separate wells, which will use a considerable amount of water. 2 developments planned, consisting of a total of 60-some high-end homes, each with its own individual domestic well. Domestic wells are permitted automatically without a hearing or notification to other water users, and, at least historically, may draw 3 acre-feet per year. It's true that Mr. Abeyta has told us today of a reduction in the permitted water use. However, there hasn't been any mention of the monitoring of this water use. These communities could easily be served by 1 or 2 community wells and a mutual domestic water users association. The difference is that water users, domestic water users associations are regulated by the state engineer, and their use is limited to actual household needs, and the use is monitored. The law on individual domestic water wells is an obsolete anachronism. It was passed originally by the territorial legislature in pioneer days to accommodate a self-sufficient homestead. That is, to water livestock, a kitchen garden, and orchard, as well as household use. The state legislature has discussed amending the law and reducing use to 3/4 of an acre-foot per year, but they have not yet acted. So now the developers and Mr. Abeyta wish to take advantage of this flaw in state law. They reject the community well system as too expensive. But this water use is too expensive for the water budget of an arid land. But more importantly, we as a community and the county commission as our representatives need to look beyond the narrow issue of granting permission for these particular projects. There is a limit to how many such projects our land, and especially our limited water supply, can support. Are we there yet? If not now, when? Mr. Abeyta is fond of telling us that growth can't be stopped, but only it may be controlled. Well, I'm here to tell you that it can and must be stopped. If it is not stopped by us sooner, then it will be stopped by nature or God later, after the wells and acequias are sucked dry. We know, and Mr. Abeyta knows, that there is not an infinite supply of water. The supply available to us is replenished yearly by snow and rain in limited amounts. The snowpack at the ski valley this year is less than 60 inches deep. That is far smaller than I have ever seen in my 47 years living and farming in Arroyo Hondo. Climate science is predicting increasing numbers of dry years in the future. It is the duty of the county commission to protect the welfare of the people already living here who elected them, not to support the short-term profit of developers marketing to people who don't know they want to live here yet. We cannot afford to share a limited water supply by attracting people who didn't even know they want to live here yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of law for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
Yes.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Jai Cross. I live in Arroyo Hondo. I'm something of a newcomer. I've only been there 15 years. But I'm a commissioner on the acequia there, and I take the concerns of my community very much to heart. I was actually surprised when Edward said that he'd received no letters of concern about the subdivision, because it is very much a topic of concern. I hear people's opinions at the post office, at the acequia meetings, and at other places. And of course, their concern is about the water. That's what everybody's been talking about. That's the most limiting resource here. And it's one that we, I think, are very justified in feeling concerned about. I don't know how many wells in Hondo have gone dry in the last 15 years, but I know there are quite a few down there. And actually, in reference to this particular subdivision, I'm encouraged by some of the things that Mr. Abeyta and other people are doing, the elimination of swimming pools, the forbidding of swamp coolers, the conservative water budget, and the water banking. And I certainly hope that that water banking is more than just a couple of years until this gets approved. Like Mr. Miera, I see that that's of great importance, keeping the water rights on a particular acequia in a particular area. However, I'm still very much concerned about the effect of 36 new wells, even if they're going to be phased in over time. And with respect to Mr. Hall, I understand that he's using standard methodology in doing his measurements, but a 48-hour test on one well does not really convince me of the effect that it's going to have downstream on us. So I think this proposal has been very well thought out. I think, as Edward has said, they've done a lot of good things. As Mr. Abeyta has mentioned, they've had a lot of favorable letters, but I just wonder, is this really the right time to be considering 36 new wells at all, even if they have a lot of the details right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Mr. Thielke?
Right hand. Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of law for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Neil Thielke. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, I think my question is for Mr. Sanger. I heard in the testimony that a mention of a buggy road. This is a road that comes off of Valencia Road, just north of R.C. Gorman's. And if I have a client in there, and it's not keyed, it's a button code. I'm just wondering if that's an alternate access to this property. And I could not go in there today after this weather. It's like caliche. And I'm just wondering if this road is intended, if it's going to be used as an access for this development, if it's going to be developed, and whether the plan includes that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thielke. Mr. Abeyta, Mr. Sanger, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, one of the agreements that has been entered into with the neighbors has to do with severely restricting the use of Buggy Road as access to the subdivision. In the document that's already been submitted into the record, there is an agreement with adjacent landowners that this would only be used for emergency access, and that's the purpose for that's the reason why we're gating that access. It's in writing, it's been submitted, it's been agreed to. That is not the major access to the subdivision. It's only for emergency access and for emergency service providers.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of law for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
Yes.
Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Don Suskowich. I don't live within 1,000 feet of the subdivision, but I'm within 300 feet of the entrance, the road that services the subdivision, which is the Mariposa subdivision. I'm adjacent to that. This subdivision, I view it as just a continuation of that previous subdivision, however legally it's done. But, you know, so I feel like, you know, I am being infected by it. I wrote a letter. I didn't know that the land had been transferred already. There's a couple issues So I know Mr. Troy doesn't own the land anymore. What my letter addresses is turning residential agricultural land to residential in a desert zone, impact of adjacent property owners to subdivisions, and what happens when covenants and design criteria are ignored. The purpose of this letter is to explain the effects of the Mariposa subdivision on its neighbors in light of further subdivision plans by the same landowner. In 1995, Nat Troy purchased the land that he subdivided into the Mariposa subdivision. At that time, the east section, which I adjoined, was grassland with 40 to 50 acre-feet of water attached. Before we adjoining neighbors knew it was sold, Mr. Troy transferred the water rights to his other properties. When I approached him about his plans and the effect this transfer would have on the land from which it had been removed, he informed me that the land would go back to sagebrush. I requested that he keep some water rights on the fragile eastern section of the land to create a buffer zone for us, his neighbors. I was informed by his designer that this was not possible. At the county meeting concerning the subdivision, Mr. Troy was asked about the grasslands, and he said it would be reseeded to native plantings. Flash forward 10 years, the grass has died, the lots sold, the land disturbed by berm, road, and utility building. Mr. Troy has recovered his investment plus his profit, and the troubles begin. First, huge crops of tumbleweeds took over the grasslands and migrated to the east by the direction of the prevailing winds. The land has been sold to absentee owners who have no interest in the environmental impact of the situation on their neighbors. It took articles in the Taos News to shame them to attempt to fix what Mr. Troy neglected to address. The tumbleweeds were plowed under, seeding was attempted. Of course, more tumbleweeds came back. Another plowing was undertaken, and seeding was attempted in a very half-hearted, feeble attempt that was not coordinated with the seasonal rains. Of course, it failed. Enter an exponential population growth of prairie dogs in what has become essentially a wasteland in which no predators could sneak up on them. As the prairie dogs increased and as they consumed the meager weeds on the disturbed land, they moved eastward and began consuming vegetation on the lands of the neighbors. In the past few years, my neighbor and I have poisoned literally hundreds of burrows each. Before Mr. Troy created his subdivision, there were no prairie dogs on our properties. Now the present nightmare. With the land stripped of all green matter, the exposed dirt is being blown over our lots. We have dust bowl conditions of fine adobe soil. At times, we can't get to the car, from the car to the house without receiving a dirt bath. The dust is so fine that it passes around the weather stripping of doors and windows. It may be time for another Taos News article. In summary, I'm asking that Mr. Troy's failure to mitigate the effects that the ecological changes his subdivision have visited upon his neighbors be weighed in light of any further subdivision of his lands. I'm enclosing pictures in the original application in which he stated that such changes and disturbances would be addressed. Those changes were never addressed by Mr. Troy. I do hope you see the pictures. The pictures tell thousands of words. You have a moving science experiment of what happens when subdivisions are not, don't live up to their plans. This was a very good plan. There was good intent here, but it did not follow through. And the developer did not follow through with his promises to adjacent landowners and the people he sold the land to. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Sir?
You're about to give is true and factual.
I do.
Would you please state your name?
Yes. My name's Clark Dunham, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible. I've lived here 25 years, and I wasn't here too many years before I knew that water was a very precious resource, and it was not to be taken lightly. So I don't support this subdivision lightly, okay, because I know that, like I said, water is a very, very important resource. But I also know that we can't close the gate after we move here. 25 years ago, I would love to have closed the gate. After I moved here, I liked Taos just the way it was. There's been many changes since then. Some of them I agree with, some of them I like, and many I don't. But we can't close the gate. People are going to want to live here, move a business here, and raise their kids here, as I am doing. It's kind of, I think, an unwritten rule in our country that if you own something, you can generally do with it whatever you want, assuming you're not impacting negatively on somebody else. So I believe that if you own land, you should be able to do with it whatever you want. So if you own 400 acres, and if you wish to subdivide it and make a profit on it, that should be allowed, as long as it doesn't impact somebody else negatively. I understand that there's 36 lots or home sites in this plot or this project. I believe that's right. And so there's going to be 36 wells. I'm more concerned that if this is not approved by the county and another project is approved with 72 5-acre home sites or more home sites at, say, 2 or 3 acres, instead of 36 wells, you're going to have 72 wells. So I'm concerned about that. And lastly, so what I'm trying to say here is I think it's better to have obviously 36 wells than 72, okay? Lastly, the impact on our economy. We do need jobs, and as all of us know, our economy is not that strong right now. I have been here 25 years, like I stated, have had several businesses. I bought the Radio Shack store from Rose Neighbors a couple of years ago. I had to close that because of the economy. So we need the jobs, even though they may be temporary. Most of the jobs that are going to be created by this project are going to be local jobs. Local contractors are going to be putting in roads, putting in infrastructure. Local contractors are going to be building the homes out there, and they're not all going to be built at one time, as we all know, regardless of whether all the sites have been sold. So some of that impact is going to be spread over several years. And I understand the 50-year thing about the water. But again, I have to kind of caution everybody in the audience and also the commissioners that we can't stop the growth here. There's no way you're going to stop the growth, regardless if we wanted to or not. So the only thing that we can do is to control that growth in a productive way that is good for the people who live here now and also for those who are going to be coming afterwards. So I have to state categorically that I support this project. I followed it in the newspaper. I've talked to several people about it. And I understand the impact it will have on our water, but I still am in support of the project. And I would be happy to answer any questions concerning me or my thoughts on this if the commission would like. Any questions at all? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Silva.
And Chairman, before Mr. Silva gets up, Edward, is this a subdivision that could, theoretically, there's, what, 400 acres out there? And our subdivision laws or could actually, they could have actually built one house per acre? Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, one thing to note, you are correct to a certain extent. You're correct in the fact that if this individual, for whatever reason, opted not to pursue a subdivision, family transfers are certainly available. And with family transfers, we get no infrastructure. With family transfers, we get no water use monitoring. Effectively, there's no infrastructure associated with family transfers, and you would have basically what would be known as maybe some type of a colonias development. No disrespect to the people up in Upper Las Colinas, but more so to the colonias development down in the Las Cruces area, where you have a bunch of homes stacked up against each other. The New Mexico Environment Department requires 3/4 of an acre minimum to have a conventional septic with a leach line. Conceivably, if the applicant chose and he has 400, I know this is an exaggeration, but if the applicant had 400 individual or immediate family members that he could call or qualify as separate members, he could conceivably create an excess of 400 lots out there, and each one of them could conceivably have their own well and their own septic.
Thank you.
Under oath and penalty of law for perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true.
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Michael Silva is my name. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good afternoon. Commissioner and Mr. Edward Beal, you took the wind out of my sails. I was just going to bring up that point in that, you know, you could eventually, without a good development, end up with maybe up to 400 individual wells. I'd rather have 36 than 400. You know, I come to you and presenting to you today, wearing a couple of different hats. One is a businessman, one is a lifelong member of this community. The businessman of me says, like Mr. Dunham pointed out, we need the jobs. The economy's been terrible here recently. This would put to work a lot of local people. And while it may be a lot of that work is going to happen on the short term, I think what those dollars do is create and generate other jobs that will potentially maybe be long-term. So we don't know where it's going to end up going, but I do know that homes and residential construction is usually done by local contractors. They're not going to be the big contractors that come out of Albuquerque, Santa Fe, or even out of the state for that matter. They're going to be local contractors employing local people who spend their money here locally. And that is just something we need right now. The resident, the county resident within me is concerned about the water and our environment. We've heard a lot of opinions here today, a lot of valid opinions. I did appreciate the comments, I believe it was by, I'm not sure who made them, I think it was Mr. Dunham, about, you know, closing the gate behind you. I mean, we've all seen that here. I grew up here, and, you know, when I was a child growing up here in this community, I enjoyed what I had. I cherished what I had. I liked what I had. I didn't want it to change. But it's not up to me, and we have to be open-minded and understand and remember that growth is inevitable, and it's our job as community leaders to control that growth. I could have been very selfish and said, let's close the door behind me and work my entire life just preaching that and living that way. But I think that's not fair to what we stand for as Americans. We are a melting pot of people. People come here. Growth is inevitable. Again, back to what I was starting to say about opinions. Everybody's had some opinions here. Some of them are based on maybe what, you know, information they can obtain, information that that they're trying to put together to try to make a point, and they're basing that on their views, whether they like this development or not. Then we hear some other opinions that are professional opinions. I think here at the county we have an excellent planning department. I heard the opinion of the planning department is a favorable opinion for approval. I can appreciate that. I know that they just didn't pull that out of the air.
They have a lot of work, I'm sure countless hours, taking in all the information, making sure that that the applicant is abiding by all the rules and regulations, not only by the county, but by the state and the federal government. And so we've heard the opinions from the county planning staff. We heard some opinions from the engineer, who's a professional engineer who's had many, many years of work under his belt, working in this community and even outside of this community. We've heard from a hydrological study, a professional opinion. This gentleman has many years under his belt. He's been educated in that field, and his opinion is based on studies and facts. It's not just something that's merely pulled out of the sky. I applaud the applicant for taking the time to reach out to the community, to our friends at the Pueblo. We have to be considerate of each other, and I believe they've done that. They've reached out, they've opened up themselves, their books, their ideas to what this project is all about, to try to mitigate any concerns, and they conceded to many of those. I applaud them for eliminating the swimming pools, for keeping the use of water down to a minimum that will be monitored. I think that they've done this in a responsible way, and so, Commission, thank you for hearing me today, and I just want to say that from the business point of view and from a person who intends to live the rest of their life out in this community, I just want you to know that I have studied this issue, and I'm in favor of this from many different points, and I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Taos Pueblo, go ahead and come forward.
Swear and affirm under oath and penalty of lawful perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual. Will you please state your name for the record?
My name is Gilbert Suazo, Sr. I'm a tribal councilman at Taos Pueblo. I have with me the Lieutenant War Chief, Albino Lujan, and our Tribal Realty Officer, Riva Suazo. Taos Pueblo appreciates the opportunity to appear before the Commission regarding the Beausoleil proposed subdivision. Since the last hearing, we have met with developers' representatives, Mr. Alex Abeyta and Mr. Scott Sanger, and we had also submitted our statement of concerns and issues. We have met with these gentlemen, like I said, and we appreciate the developers' agreement to several of our requests that we had identified. These issues were discussed at a meeting of the Pueblo and the Beausoleil representatives on April 14th, 2014. Just yesterday, we received the developers' written response to these issues. We are still reviewing the responses and have not provided them our response yet. We understand that the developer's written response to us is part of the record today. Our response is not ready to be submitted for the record since we have not had time to review their response in detail. We just want to note that the developer responded favorably to several of our concerns and issues, and in other areas they have not responded as we desired in a way that they do so. And we have also had site visits out to the project site by some of our tribal officials to look at the archaeological sites, and that area is an area that we've known ancestrally where some of our people lived years and years ago. So there's ample evidence of that out there now. We want to make a clarification or correction regarding the boundary fence that was discussed, and this is the fence between the Pueblos, Tract B, and an animal control fence that was discussed at our meeting with them on April the 14th. It does appear that we're misunderstood, that we offered to install the animal control fence. We already have a barbed wire fence that defines our Tract B property, and what we had requested was that the developer install and maintain a 3 to 4 foot high wire field fence along that common boundary. What we had asked for was access for emergency maintenance of our fence, and we appreciate the developer's willingness to provide that access. We have not reached agreement on important water issues, including whether domestic wells can be used when the prior owner is severing a portion of the irrigation water rights currently under permit for use in the subdivision lots, and whether the water use limit per lot should be reduced to the water budget estimate of 0.37 acre-feet a year. We have asked the developer to continue working with us to resolve these issues before the final plat hearing in July, because we believe that these issues must be resolved in order for the county to approve the final plat. As of today, we have received confirmation that the developer will continue to work with us on these resolution of these issues, including the ones about water, before that final plat hearing. These issues are complicated, and it also involves potential impacts to the Pueblo's buffalo pasture, a very important cultural and natural resource, which is a wetland. And these issues, therefore, will take time and cooperation to resolve. We will appreciate the Commission's understanding and appreciation for the Pueblo's issues, and to be provided the time to reach a resolution with the developers on these concerns. I would like to just note a couple items that we feel are important. That these are two of the recommendations that the subdivider has basically rejected, and these have to do with eventually someday there may be a community or regional water and sewer system in that area. We don't know when in the future. What we were asking for is that that they would agree that when that would happen, that's what they would connect to, and the wells that would be there would be plugged up so that they would be using the community system rather than the wells. So we had suggested, or we had recommended, that this is one thing that we would like to have them agree on. However, they believe that there's just too many unknowns, as they say, to commit to such an agreement at this time. And certainly we understand that there are unknowns, but we also know that a community may someday expand its system out into that area. Or there may be a mutual domestic water consumers association out there. We don't know, but whenever that happens, we would like for them to connect to the community of the regional system. And certainly at the Pueblo, that's what we are doing, is we're trying to have all our people connected to the community system So we minimized the number of domestic wells that are out there and serve our community from a limited number of wells. I'd like to express my appreciation to Chairman and the Commission for the time and the opportunity to express ourselves here at this meeting. Thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Suazo.
Mr. Suazo, sorry, Chairman. Mr. Suazo, is there a time frame where you think we could, maybe you and the applicant can sit down and mitigate some of these still concerns that you still have?
We are continuing to work with them. I think we've met about at least 3 different times talking about these issues. Initially it was introductory, and then on April 14th we got into the more details about our concerns, and they've given us the response. We expect to meet again sometime soon. We want to be able to resolve those water issues, and there's, I think, some innovative solutions that could come out of this. And certainly July seems like a ways off, but sometimes you can run into a time crunch when you're trying to resolve complicated issues. We certainly will continue to meet with them, but we would like to make sure that there is ample opportunity for us to resolve these issues.
Any other questions for Mr. Suazo? Commissioner Sanchez.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I want to welcome you, Mr. Suazo, Mr. Lujan, and Ms. Suazo also to come in for this meeting. And, you know, I respect the jobs that are being created in this area, you know, and what I'm looking at more than anything is our water issues. And I have a concern, as you folks have, you have many concerns yet to be ironed out. And also one of them is that Arroyo Hondo was never included on this, and I think it's important that we include everybody around there. And also the Des Montes Ditch Association, you know, I'm sure they have concerns. And being the Taos Pueblo, that's my district, so as an elected official, I've got to listen to my constituents in that area and others. So I would, the Chairman, Commissioners, I would like to really have more time on this. I believe the Pueblo, Arroyo Hondo, Des Montes area, those folks living up there, I think they got some issues that need to be ironed out. And I think it's something that we need to really look at, Chairman, Commissioners, and let's not push it. Let's not do it quickly. And I respect Mr. Silva coming in, because that does create jobs, but we got to be careful how we do that. So with that, thank you so much, Chairman.
Mr. Malone, any thoughts?
Well, Mr. Chairman, first of all, there is a provision for moving to executive session. I don't know if we're through with the testimony yet, but there is a provision after that happens and you close the meeting for moving to executive session for deliberation, and that would be an appropriate time for me to give legal advice to the Commission.
Okay. Mr. Suazo, anything else from the Taos Pueblo side?
There was a question raised about access to that subdivision. There is that old Mariposa easement, and that easement has been vacated, and that was one of our concerns, that there would be an attempt at access through Taos Pueblo land to the subdivision. But that has been vacated, so there will be no access through that old road into the subdivision.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Suazo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? Mr. Malone, at this point, then I can, okay, Mr. Abeyta.
Chairman, Commission members, just kind of a summary rebuttal. We believe that the Beausoleil Subdivision application is submitted and presented meets all the requirements of your current subdivision regulations. It has the endorsement of all the agencies that responded. We agree that we need more time to meet with Taos Pueblo and look at water and sewer further. However, because of the construction season, we are asking for a potential favorable consideration of preliminary plat approval. If you were to grant that today, we would not schedule the final plat public hearing, which has to go back to notification, advertisement in Taos News, etc. At the earliest, it would be perhaps the second meeting in July before you, and it possibly could slide to early August based on our negotiations with Taos Pueblo. But we would hate to see a continuance to a future date of the preliminary plat. We'd rather get a preliminary plat approval and come back to you. We'll work with Taos Pueblo. With Ms. Pam Harris from the Arroyo Hondo, there's no solution. We won't agree to a community water system, and that's what she wants. We'll listen to her other concerns and try to mitigate them, but I just want to be clear that for us to agree with anyone for a community water system would require an export. It would be a 3 to 5 year process. It would kill the project, and basically you'd end up with several hundred family lots over the next 20 years, or who knows what it would be. All I'm saying is this subdivision fully meets the requirements. It's as low density of subdivision as you can ever have. The only other alternative is the no-build alternative, which is to leave the land vacant and not do anything with it. This client of ours has purchased the land from Nat Troy. Nat Troy has nothing to do with the subdivision other than he provided the access easement from Cavalry Camp Road into the 400 acres through his land. It's a 60-foot wide easement. That's his only involvement. This is an independent developer separate from Nat Troy. He's bought the land. He understands that upon approval, his property tax will go from agricultural to residential. It's a significant tax base for the county when the subdivision is platted. So that's our request for you to consider preliminary plat approval with the idea that we'll continue meeting with Taos Pueblo. We believe we're going to be able to reach an agreement and come back to you for a final plat. Thank you.
Just one more thing. The subdivider has accepted every one of staff's planning recommendations. Every one.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, a quick question for
Commissioner
Alex.
Blankenhorn.
Yeah, Alex, I still have a concern about enforcement, because of what has happened with the Mariposa subdivision. And I know you're planning on seeding, but those pictures are pretty compelling, and if it doesn't get seeded, then you are going to have a similar problem where you've really changed the ecostructure to some serious effects. So can you allay our fears on enforcement on that, and also on the monitoring of the water usage? Those are, since they are single wells, there's no metering requirement, and so I just want to make sure that we get good enforcement on this thing.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, you go to tab 9, which is the agreement for infrastructure, and you go to Exhibit A, which is the engineer estimate. I'm looking for bid item 11 is Class A seating. We actually have $10,000 plugged into the seating item. I don't remember what the contractor bid on that, so we do require that all disturbed areas, back slopes, We're going to build this berm on Route Beausoleil. We require that all these areas be seeded. There is a 10% contingency within this budget of $150,000 that helps cover changes, change orders. So basically, as we do monthly drawdowns and we come to you for a final termination of the agreement for infrastructure, that seeding needs to be completed before we can do that. So that gives you a level of comfort that the seeding is going to happen.
I'm still worried about the seeding taking.
Well, once again, as far as the seeding taking, we hope that we get some good rains after we seed it. There's no money in the budget to water seeding. That's cost prohibitive. We will do our best to seed it. And this is a 4 to 6 month construction sequence. So if we start in August sometime, here we are into December before the project is wrapped up. The seeding more than likely would be not done till the following spring. Mm-hmm. And all we can do is work with staff and try to get the seeding to take. But some of the dust you saw in these pictures here are not actually on the roadway or the easement. It's on the 24 lot owners that bought those lots. 20 of them are absent owners. Some of their lots have been cleared and grubbed. No more sagebrush, no more grass, and Nat Troy has no control of Mother Nature or these private lot owners keeping their lots from getting too dusty.
Right, but do we have something in the covenants that will assure that lot owners in the future will seed the property and make sure that it takes? And if it doesn't take, then seed it again, watch the weather forecast and all that.
I can have Scott come up and talk about that a little bit. You also had a second question, Mr. Blankenhorn. What was it?
Oh, it was monitoring. Since they're individual wells, there's no metering.
So let me explain how the water system works. The state engineer will issue a permit for each of these domestic wells. Each of the lot owners will hire their own well driller. They'll drill the well, and they will be required to install a water meter. The homeowners association will be in charge of obtaining all the monthly water use data. We've agreed that it'll be provided to Taos County. It'll be provided to Taos Pueblo. And of course, it gets submitted to the state engineer. So there will be monitoring of the water use and data kept as to how much each lot is using.
Okay. And I just want to make a brief comment about water. Obviously, we are all concerned about water. But, we as elected officials and under state and local laws regarding subdivisions, we have to consider the evidence that's been brought before us. And the evidence that's been brought before us is pretty compelling based upon well-established models for measuring effects on water tables. And as it turns out, one lucky thing is that there is a very substantial water table in that area. And based upon the numbers of 6 feet after full development after 50 years, that's I think a 6% effect upon the total water table. And the state engineer uses a much higher percentage, closer to 50% allowance. And so it's really so far from the allowable limit on water usage that I fear that if we said no to this subdivision based on water, we would almost have to say no to any future subdivision just on that water issue. Now, I understand and totally understand that there's continuing issues to be dealt with between the Pueblo, but I'm just talking about water supply, that very particular issue of water supply. And I'm also, impressed by the fact that it's 400 acres that forever will be preserved to 36 lots, to 36 wells. That's almost like a land trust in some ways, because obviously 48 acres over time could have 400 wells punched. And so this subdivision, aside from the other issues that we're still discussing, it does end up preserving quite a bit of property and water. So thank you for answering my question, and I do hope that there's some way to negotiate something within the infrastructure completion program that requires somebody to try to seed again if it doesn't work the first time.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Malone, I guess at this point I can go ahead and close the meeting for public comment.
Yeah, you can close the public hearing, and if the commission decides that it wants to go into executive session, it would be the appropriate time to do that, and I can read the necessary requirements from the Open Meeting Act.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. At this time, I'll go ahead and close the public meeting, and I will entertain a motion, if necessary, to go into executive session to discuss the subdivision further.
So moved, Chairman.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just to make the record complete, then pursuant to Open Meetings Act 1015-1 H3, which is the exception to the Open Meetings Act for deliberations in connection with quasi-judicial hearings, which this is a quasi-judicial hearing. In addition, our subdivision ordinance specifically provides for consideration in executive session. Decision won't be made in executive session, just so the public knows. It'll be made publicly, but for consideration in executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Any further discussion? If not, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Commissioner Brody.
Yes.
Chairman Romero.
Yes. Okay. I unfortunately cannot give an estimate as to how long executive session will take. We will try to make it as quickly as possible. And thank you very much. Okay, motion to come back into session.
So moved, Chairman.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Commissioner Brody.
Yes.
Chairman Romero.
Yes, very well. We'll move on then to a report from our attorney, Mr. Malone.
Mr. Chairman, the commission met in executive session pursuant to 1015-1 H3, which allows for executive session in connection with quasi-judicial proceedings. The only matter discussed was the Beausoleil Subdivision. No action was taken.
Okay.
So moved to accept the county attorney's report.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Commissioner Brody.
Yes.
Chairman Romero.
Yes. Okay, commissioners, what is the decision of the commission? Is there a motion at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I just ask Mr. V. Hill to go over the 41 contingencies on his preliminary plat recommendation. Not all of them, but just to clarify them for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Commissioner Blankenhorn, for clarification purposes, I would refer you to page 28 of Planning Staff's report. And the first point that I would like to clarify under my recommendations, under the bold print, the Taos County Planning Staff recommends to the Taos County Board of Commissioners, rather than the Planning Commission, approval of the preliminary plat application for the proposed Beausoleil subdivision contingent on the applicant complying with the following conditions of approval. Note, the conditions that are applicable to final plat requirements shall be met prior to the applicant submitting the application for final plat. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, before I read for you clarifications in regards to staff's recommendations or conditions, I would also like to read to you to indicate that planning staff believes that the subdivider can fulfill the proposals contained in the disclosure statement, and that the subdivider's proposal conforms with the New Mexico Subdivision Act and with Ordinance 2005-8, which are the Taos County subdivision regulations. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, having said that, planning staff recommends approval subject to the conditions. Clarification on the conditions, on condition number 8, or let me just, before I read condition number 8, let me state, planning staff's report was based on the fact or the understanding that the applicant initially represented that swimming pools would be proposed within this subdivision. The applicant has publicly testified and indicated here during the public hearing that swimming pools are not allowed within the Beausoleil subdivision. Having said that and having accepted the applicant's testimony, therefore planning staff respectfully requests or amends its conditions to reflect number 8. Rather than indicating swimming pool construction shall comply with current ICC codes, planning staff recommends that number 8 be revised to read, swimming pools within the Beausoleil Subdivision, as per the applicant, shall be prohibited. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner Blankenhorn, planning staff recommends striking number 9 under the present staff report in its entirety, which reads, all swimming pools shall be made available as additional water storage for firefighting purposes, to have number 9 now become number 10, and in sequential order to have number 10 now become 11 on through number 40, eliminating the existing number 41 that was referenced in the original staff report, to now include a new number 41 to read as follows. In addition to the conditions requiring specific revision identified in planning staff's report, the applicant shall revise all documents such as the plats, engineering sheets, etc., and obviously the disclosure statement, the codes, covenants, and restrictions, and if requirements, the design guidelines, to reflect all agreements entered into amongst the applicant, the Lower Des Montes Neighborhood Association, Mary Humphrey, Esquire, representing Hinton, Strickland, and Backinger, and Gillum, and of course, Taos Pueblo. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Edward, would you go back up to 9A?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Barone, was that number 9?
I believe 9A, I believe it is. Maybe it's 12A.
Or 8A, I apologize. I guess I need to strike that one as well, and I overlooked that.
Okay, I just thought so.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Commissioner Barone, with all due respect, we inadvertently did not strike 8A, and we need to strike 8A under my recommendation. And this one is to remove this language in its entirety that references all swimming pools shall be enclosed or covered during non-use in order to control evaporation.
Yeah.
And maybe A as a whole, because we're not developing swimming pools in that area?
That is correct.
But you have some language that you have suggested to replace that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we have suggested the language for number 8 to read, inclusive of striking 8 and 8A both, to read swimming pools within the Beausoleil Subdivision as per the applicant shall be prohibited.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, you've heard the suggestion of our planning director. Is there a motion at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Planning Department's recommendation to approve the preliminary plat in accordance with the 41 contingencies set forth by the Planning Director and as amended by the Planning Director, and also to encourage the applicant to continue negotiations with the Pueblo on the remaining issues outstanding.
Mr. Chairman, if Commissioner Blankenhorn could amend his motion to include direction to the planning director and the county attorney within 30 days to draft a decision and findings consistent with the motion.
So amended in accordance with the county manager's recommendation.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Very good. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, believe subdivision met all requirements that were needed to be correct, Edward?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Sanchez, it was staff's determination that the applicant had met the requirements of Ordinance 2005-8, which is the Taos County Subdivision Regulations. In addition, the applicant obtained favorable responses or reviews or opinions from the state agencies that responded in reference to the proposed Beausoleil subdivision.
Thank you, Edward.
Okay. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Before we do so, I'd like to thank the staff. I know Mr. Vihill has been working on this for many years now, I believe, and everyone else, Nathan, along with everyone else involved in this. Thank you very much for the dedication.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner